What if you're already dead? There's a moment, silent, in between thoughts, when everything feels just slightly off. The room is still, but the stillness isn't peaceful. It's hollow. Familiar objects around you feel distant. Your hands, your voice, the ticking of the clock, all present, but somehow detached. As if you're not in the world anymore, just remembering what it was like to be alive. What if you are? Not alive, that is. What if this is the afterlife, disguised in routine, hidden in the mundane? No flames, no heavens, just a continuation so seamless you never noticed the switch. Maybe death wasn't a door, but a dimmer switch. A slow fading. And now you're here living a life that feels like yours, but missing something you can't name. This question doesn't come from fantasy. It echoes ancient philosophical whispers, from Plato's allegory of shadows on a cave wall, to Descartes' doubt of everything but thought itself, to Buddhist teachings that speak of life as illusion. Each asks, what if your perception is the lie? What if memory is the veil? And if you had died, when would it have been? That car crash you narrowly missed. That illness that felt like more than it was. That time you woke up and felt like you hadn't truly returned. Maybe your consciousness was reconstructed from fragments, replaying a script it once knew, a theater of moments stitched from echoes of the real. Some versions of this idea even suggest you're dreaming this world posthumously, that the last flickers of brain activity are stretching subjective time into eternity, every second looping into a false lifetime. In this theory, your mind, untethered from the body, is improvising meaning to hold itself together. But if this is the afterlife, why does it feel so ordinary? Why bills and dishes and silent elevators? Perhaps that's the punishment, or perhaps that's the mercy, a version of existence crafted to match your expectations. You died and got exactly what you believed in: another day, another morning, another chance. Which leads to the quietest part of the question: if you are already dead, would you ever want to know? A question that breaks reality. You've asked it before, maybe as a joke, maybe in passing, maybe in silence just before sleep. What if none of this is real? But there's another question, stranger and far more dangerous. A question that doesn't just challenge reality, it breaks it. What if asking any question changes the answer? Not just in theory, but at the deepest levels of existence. The act of questioning shifts the very nature of what's true. You inquire, and the universe responds, not with revelation, but with transformation. You don't discover reality. You shape it. This isn't poetry. It mirrors the peculiar behaviors found in quantum mechanics, where particles seem to exist in multiple states until observed. The infamous double-slit experiment shows that a particle behaves differently when watched. That measurement itself changes reality, not passively, actively. So what happens when you ask something like, is time real? Does time itself wrinkle under the pressure? When you wonder, what is consciousness? Are you peeling away a veil or sewing on a new one? If the universe contains all that exists, and you with your limited mind begin to probe its edges, aren't you also altering the edge? It's like trying to measure the temperature of a flame with a candle. The moment you bring yourself close, the flame reacts to you. The question burns away the original state. There's a terrifying beauty in this. The idea that truth is unstable, not because it's weak, but because it's listening. The cosmos may not be a static object waiting to be understood. It may be a mirror, rippling with every gaze, reshaping with every thought. Now think about free will. Does asking whether you have it remove the illusion that kept it alive, or create the illusion from scratch? This is the question that breaks reality. Not because the answer is shocking, but because the answer cannot exist without you, and you can't exist the same once you've asked. So be careful. Sometimes, the deeper you dig, the more you realize there's no bottom, just echoes of questions that never stop changing the ground beneath them. Can the future be changed? You wake from a strange dream and feel for a moment that something important has already happened, something that hasn't happened yet. A decision, a face, a loss. The future lingers like déjà vu, whispering that it's already written. But if the future is written, can it be rewritten? This question splits time in two. On one side, we are told the future is ours to shape, that every choice sends ripples forward, that fate is not fixed. But on the other side, physics suggests something colder, that time may be just another dimension, like width or depth, past, present, and future, already existing, already set. If that's true, then the future isn't ahead of us. It's beside us, immutable, already there, unreachable, not because it's hidden, but because it's finished. But even that idea unravels when we ask who's doing the changing. If you go back in time to change the future, then you already had gone back. If you choose differently tomorrow, then you were always going to. The act of changing was already baked into the script. So are you changing the future, or just following the part you were meant to play? Some philosophers have suggested time is like a book. You, the reader, move from page to page, but the story already written. Others argue time is written in pencil, not pen, that possibilities exist until observed, that your choices collapse uncertainty into fact, that what feels like freedom is simply the narrowing of infinite paths into one visible trail. Still, if you believe you can change the future, you also believe something about the present must be unstable. It assumes a future that isn't watching, that isn't aware of itself, that isn't already reacting to your next step. But what if time is recursive? What if your future self is influencing you now, nudging you with instincts, warnings, dreams? And what if you've already changed the future without knowing? A word held back, a smile offered, a street crossed at the right second. The moment passed, forgotten, but history shifted just slightly. A war delayed, a life saved, a meeting never meant to happen. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just enough to tilt a life, a chain of lives into something else. Maybe the future isn't one fixed thread, but a tapestry constantly rewoven as we think, act, and hope. So perhaps the question isn't whether the future can be changed. Perhaps it already has been. Is the universe an answer? Maybe it didn't start with a bang. Maybe it started with a question, something ancient, primal, and unfinished. A question that had to unfold itself across galaxies, across time, across everything. A question not spoken aloud, but woven into gravity and light. And what if that question wasn't asked by something outside the universe, but by the universe itself? What if the cosmos exists, not to contain an answer, but to be one? Not a solution waiting to be discovered, but an expression too vast to fit in a sentence. Every law of physics, every spiral of a galaxy, every heartbeat of a conscious creature, could it all be part of a solution to something we can't remember asking? Something buried too deeply in the fabric of time to name. The moment of the Big Bang could have been the punctuation to a sentence we never got to read. Religions and philosophies have hinted at this, that the universe is not just matter and energy, but intention. That being is not neutral, but expressive, and yet no one agrees on what the question was. Is it why? Is there something rather than nothing? Is it what am I? Is it how do I know I exist? Or maybe it's something more personal, more silent. A question not of intellect, but of presence, of being. Even science, for all its rigor, is a conversation with the unknown. Equations are guesses made in confidence. Hypotheses are elegant questions in disguise. When we launch telescopes into space or smash particles in a collider, we're not just testing ideas, we're listening, we're asking. We're hoping to overhear the universe answer itself, and sometimes, in moments of awe, it feels like it whispers back. Maybe the universe is recursive. Maybe its answer is the question, looping endlessly, each iteration more complex. Maybe we're not meant to reach a final truth, but to live through a constantly unfolding reply. The cosmos, ever-changing, ever-echoing, like a poem rewritten by the very act of being read. But if the universe is an answer, who's supposed to understand it? What if no one can? What if it's not meant to be read, but experienced? Maybe the answer is a sunrise, a song, a grief that breaks you, a laugh you weren't expecting. Maybe it's encoded in the way you look up at the stars and feel small but not insignificant, or the way silence feels full when you're alone under the sky. And if that's true, then the question might not have needed words. Only wonder. Do questions shape reality? You ask a question. The air doesn't stir, nothing moves, and yet something has changed. You've broken the surface, punctured the calm, invited the world to bend. What if questions don't just seek reality? They sculpt it. It sounds strange, but so does the world. In quantum physics, observation alters outcome, not because the eye has magic, but because inquiry rearranges the field. The unmeasured exists in blur. The measured falls into place. Particles snap to a decision, as if waiting to be asked. The universe, it seems, listens not with ears, but with structure. If you ask a tree its name, it doesn't answer, but you see it differently. If you ask whether time is linear, your mind steps outside of it. A good question doesn't reveal truth. It creates tension, pressure, gravity. It distorts the landscape around it. Reality warps not in protest, but in curiosity. And over time, the questions we ask reshape the very structure of the world. Ancient people asked what fire was and built cities. We asked what stars were and found galaxies. We asked who we are and spun gods, laws, languages, and nations from that flame. Each question redirected the course of rivers, rewrote maps, redrew the human soul. Maybe questions are seeds, not tools, planted in the soil of the mind. Not every seed blooms, but some change the entire forest. Some take root in the culture of a civilization and grow into revolutions, into sciences, into mythologies that define eras. Even within yourself, the questions you ask can change your life more than the answers. Am I happy? What do I want? Who am I trying to become? You might not get a reply, but you're not the same once you've asked. Your thoughts, your choices, your story shift around the space the question carved. So then, what is the world made of? Quarks in charge, or curiosity, kneaded into shape by millennia of asking? Is reality a substance or a story told in response to the questions that haunt it? Maybe matter itself is bound to wonder. Maybe the universe waits to be questioned before it settles into form. Maybe this is why children ask endlessly, not to know, but to grow, to trigger, to stretch the world around them into something new. Their questions don't just explore, they expand. The shape of possibility stretches with each wild, untamed why. Perhaps the most important thing isn't what you learn from your questions. It's what the world becomes in their wake. What if reality is a lie? It begins as a whisper, a hesitation, a flicker in the corner of your eye. The world feels slightly staged. The timing too perfect, the people too rehearsed, the coincidences too convenient. You brush it off, but the thought lingers. What if none of this is real? Not as in a dream, but as in a construction, a deception, a mask so seamless it's mistaken for truth. What if everything you've ever known, your senses, your memories, even your logic, is part of an elaborate performance? One so convincing that you never considered stepping backstage. We like to believe reality is what we see, hear, and touch, but every perception is filtered. Every experience translated by a brain that has never seen the outside world, only electrical signals bouncing around in the dark. How do you know those signals aren't fabricated, or worse, designed? The idea isn't new. Philosophers have warned us for centuries. Plato's cave, Descartes, evil demon. The brain in a vat, more recently, simulations. Mathematicians argue that if advanced civilizations can simulate consciousness, and they will, then statistically, we're more likely simulated than real. The odds, some say, are stacked against authenticity. And yet, even knowing this doesn't free you, because the lie is not in the pixels, or the props, or the physics. It's in the assumption, the faith that what you're seeing corresponds to something deeper. The trust that your thoughts were born in you, and not scripted by a machine, a god, or a forgotten version of yourself. It's the silence behind the certainty that begins to crack. But here's the question beneath the question. Does it matter? If the illusion is flawless, is it still a lie? If love, pain, beauty, and grief feel real, are they any less so because the stage beneath them is hollow? If your story moves you, does it lose meaning if it's authored by something else? And if you discovered tomorrow without doubt that everything around you was fabricated, what would you do differently? Would you resist it? Try to escape? Or would you simply keep living, knowing that fiction can still hold truth? Maybe reality isn't something we uncover. Maybe it's something we choose to believe in. And maybe the deeper lie is thinking we'd ever be able to tell the difference. Is nothing the final state? Close your eyes and try to picture nothing. Not empty space, not blackness, not a vacuum. Nothing. No matter, no mind, no measurement, no background to hold the thought. No thought at all. Can you do it? Most can't. The very act of imagining nothing produces something. A shape, a color, a sense of being outside it. Your mind rebels against it, not because you lack imagination, but because your brain was never meant to comprehend total absence. It was built for presence, pattern, survival. And nothingness offers none of those things. But what if that's where everything leads? Entropy, the tendency of systems toward disorder, points toward a heat death of the universe. A slow dissipation of energy until all distinctions blur. No movement, no difference, no time, a vast, cold stillness that's indistinguishable from nothing at all. Is that our end? And if it is that truly nothing? Or just the absence of everything we recognize as structure? A canvas wiped clean, waiting for a new hand. Could it be the final breath before a new beginning? Or is it the one state that allows no return, no echo, no memory? Some spiritual traditions speak of the void not as death, but as return, a sacred silence, a state beyond suffering or desire. Buddhism calls it nirvana, not a negation of life, but the cessation of illusion. In that sense, maybe nothing is not the final state, but the original one. The ground from which all else arises, a quiet before creation, not an erasure, but a resting point. Others argue that true nothingness is a logical impossibility, that even the idea of nothing requires a mind to hold it, that as long as a concept exists, even in negation something exists. Perhaps nothing is a limit we circle but never touch, a horizon we invent to define the light. Even mathematics resists the idea. Zero is not the absence of numbers, it's a placeholder, a concept, a silence that speaks. And yet we return to it again and again. In death, in sleep, in the space between thoughts. We reach for it in meditation, in surrender, in despair. We give it names. The void, the abyss, the end. But do we ever find it? Still, the question lingers like an aftertaste. When all things end, your thoughts, your story, your universe, what remains? Maybe not silence, maybe not darkness, maybe not even peace, just nothing. Or maybe that's the one thing that never was. Can opposites coexist? We divide the world by contrast, light and dark, good and evil, self and other. Our minds crave order, so we split reality into opposites. It's easier to navigate a map with borders. But what if those borders are illusions? What if opposites are not separate at all, but bound together, dependent, inseparable? Can something be true and false at the same time? Can a person be cruel and kind in the same breath? Can a moment be beautiful and unbearable? The ancient Taoists thought so. In the Tao Te Ching, light cannot exist without shadow. Strength arises from softness. Gain emerges from loss. The symbol of yin and yang isn't a battle. It's a dance. Each half contains a seed of the other. Each is incomplete alone. Even in physics, the duality persists. Particles are also waves. Time moves forward, yet bends. Matter is energy. In quantum mechanics, something can be in multiple states until observed, existing and not existing, until forced to decide. In psychology, we see this duality in ourselves. We want love and independence. We crave change and fear it. We lie to protect and tell the truth to destroy. The boundaries we draw in the sand are swept away by tides of mood, memory, and contradiction. Perhaps identity itself is built not from purity, but from contrast. But we resist this. Our minds prefer binaries, yes or no, right or wrong, alive or dead. We want neat categories. We want endings, certainty, simplicity. So we build fences between thoughts, between people, between the parts of ourselves we're willing to admit. But what if the human soul is a paradox? What if every truth contains contradiction? You love someone and resent them. You want to stay and leave. You fear death and long for rest. Opposites do not cancel each other. Sometimes they define each other. And in the biggest questions about life, the universe, morality, we find that opposites refuse to take sides. Justice and mercy, order and chaos, reason and emotion. They hold hands in the dark, whispering answers we can't fully hear. Maybe the deepest peace isn't found by choosing a side, but by holding both, not resolving the tension, but living inside it. Letting contradiction breathe, letting it stretch you, letting it whisper that complexity is not confusion, it's completeness. So can opposites coexist? Maybe they already do. Maybe they always have. And maybe the illusion was that they were ever truly apart. Is now even real? Try to hold on to now, not the memory of a moment, not anticipation, just now. By the time you grasp it, it's already gone. You say now, and it has already slipped behind you, like chasing a shadow cast by a flickering light. The present seems solid, but it crumbles the moment we try to touch it. What if it was never real to begin with? We imagine time as a line, past behind us, future ahead, and now as the point where they meet. But that point vanishes under inspection. Physics tells us there's no privileged now in the universe. In Einstein's space-time, past and future are just coordinates. Every now is as valid as every other. The present isn't a special slice, it's just where you're standing. Yet subjectively, now feels sacred. It feels like the only place where anything can happen. But even our brains lag behind. You're not experiencing the present, you're experiencing a reconstruction. The mind delays perception to synchronize inputs. The now you feel is already history. And if the present is built from delay, illusion, and compression, then what exactly are we living in? Some argue that now is a story, a fiction the brain writes to make sense of disconnected signals. Your senses don't update all at once. Light reaches your eyes before sound reaches your ears. Smell lags even more, and yet you perceive a unified, flowing present. Your consciousness stitches this together like a film editor cutting a scene in real time. But if your brain is editing the now, how do you know where the present actually is? Maybe it's not a slice at all, but a smudge, a haze, a negotiated average between what just happened and what's expected next. The illusion of immediacy may be less about being in the moment and more about guessing it accurately enough to survive. Meditation teaches us to return to the now. But maybe that's not to inhabit it fully, but to stop trying to chase it, to observe time without trying to freeze it, to let go of the false solidity of the moment and embrace the flowing, flickering stream. You can't bottle now, but you can stop trying to hold it. Is now just the name we give to the boundary we can never cross, a placeholder for what's already gone, or a coping mechanism we invented to give ourselves traction on the cliff face of time. Think of a song. You hear a note, but it only makes sense with the one before and after. The beauty is in the flow, not the instant. So maybe the same is true of now. Maybe it only feels real because it connects the echoes of then with the dream of what comes next. So is now even real? Or is it just where we agree to meet before time pulls us apart again? Are we predicting the past? You think of memory as something fixed, a record, a photograph stored in the mind. But what if memory is not about the past at all? What if remembering is just another form of prediction? The brain is a forecasting machine. It doesn't wait to receive the world. It guesses it. It anticipates the color of the sky, the shape of your hand, the feel of your breath. It fills in gaps, smooths out noise, and edits reality before you even realize it's there. This same machine is responsible for memory, and it uses the same tools. So when you recall your childhood room, or your mother's voice, or the feeling of being 5 years old, are you retrieving a recording, or are you reconstructing a plausible scene based on your current model of the world? Are you reaching backward, or simply imagining forward into the shape that the past should have taken? Neuroscience suggests that memory isn't stored like a file. It's recreated each time you access it. And with every act of remembering, the structure is changed, modified by the present, colored by what you now believe, fear, regret, or desire. The past is revised in real time so that it fits the person doing the remembering. And if your memories are rebuilt again and again, are they really memories? This becomes more than just a trick of psychology. It becomes a philosophical collapse of direction. If the future can be imagined based on past patterns, and the past is constructed through present expectations, then time stops moving in a straight line. You are not moving through time. You are stitching it together, moment by moment, from both ends at once. Some thinkers argue that the arrow of time is an illusion, that there's no true before and after, only a sequence we impose to make sense of entropy. In this framework, predicting the future and reconstructing the past are not opposites, they're identical functions. Both are acts of simulation. Both are shaped by the now. And maybe the past is only real because you keep guessing it back into place. So when you sit in silence and drift through memory, how do you know whether you're remembering or forecasting a world that never was? Maybe memory is just prophecy in reverse. Who thinks when you don't? Close your eyes. Let your mind go still. No thoughts, no plans, just quiet. But something keeps moving, doesn't it? A flicker of memory, a tune stuck in your head, an image flashing without context. You didn't summon it. You didn't decide to think it. And yet, there it is. Thought without a thinker. So who's doing the thinking when you're not? We like to believe our thoughts are ours, intentional, constructed, purposeful, but most of them arise uninvited. Neuroscience shows that the brain is always active, always generating content, even when you're not consciously thinking. It's imagining, predicting, calculating, dreaming. The default mode network, your mind's background hum, keeps weaving narratives from nothing. If thoughts can appear without permission, without origin, then where do they come from? Is there a thinker behind the scenes, a deeper self watching from the wings? Or is the you who claims ownership of thought just a narrator, a late arrival to the show? Some traditions say the mind is like a river. Thoughts are the current. You are not the current. You are the watcher on the bank. But that image assumes there is a watcher. What if even that is a story? One more thought among thoughts. Consider dreams. They unfold without your effort, yet they're filled with detail, characters, dialogue. Who writes them? Who selects the memories and reshapes them into surreal landscapes? And when you wake up, who decided the dream had ended? Split brain experiments have shown something unsettling. When the two hemispheres of the brain are disconnected, they act independently. Each side can hold different beliefs, make different choices, even speak separate truths. So who's thinking then? Which half is you? Or were you never one mind to begin with? And in meditation, when thoughts fall silent, when the internal voice dims, do you disappear? Or do you finally appear, no longer masked by the noise? If there's no thought, is there still a thinker? Or does the mind go on without a captain, sailing itself through an ocean of unconscious habit? Maybe you don't think your thoughts. Maybe they think you. Maybe identity isn't the source of thought, but the result, a byproduct, not a blueprint. Perhaps the mind is a machine that runs whether you're watching or not. Perhaps consciousness is less a captain and more a witness, sometimes invited, sometimes ignored. And if that's true, if thoughts are happening with or without you, then who are you really? The speaker, the listener, or the silence between them? Is awareness just a loop? There's a strange thing that happens when you become aware of your awareness. You catch yourself thinking about the fact that you're thinking. You notice that you're noticing, and suddenly the whole experience folds inward like a mirror facing another mirror, reflection upon reflection, with no end in sight. So what is awareness really? A spotlight? A witness? Or just a loop with no true center? When you focus on your breath, you're not just breathing, you're observing the act of breathing. But who is observing? Is there a stable self behind the act? Or is awareness just the brain observing itself, like a camera filming its own lens? Some neuroscientists suggest that consciousness may be a recursive process, a feedback loop generated by the brain monitoring its own activity. The cortex receives signals, interprets them, predicts outcomes, and then watches itself doing so. This looping structure might be what creates the illusion of a continuous self. But it also raises a disturbing possibility that what we call I is just a loop that got caught in its own spin. Consider the strange way your attention can split. You can think while watching yourself think. You can question your own motives, doubt your own sincerity. If awareness is just a loop, maybe introspection is simply one circuit observing another, each part feeding into the next, like a snake chasing its own tail. This idea isn't new. In ancient philosophy, particularly in Vedantic and Buddhist traditions, the self is often described as an illusion, something assembled from layers of perception and thought. The more you try to find the core, the more it dissolves. Peel away each layer, and what's left isn't a soul, it's silence. And yet, the loop persists. You wake up in the morning and say, I am me, but who is saying it? And who is hearing it? Perhaps awareness is not something you have. Perhaps it's something that happens like a pattern of ripples on the surface of a pond, no fixed point, no owner, just motion, reflecting itself again and again. If so, then the question isn't where your awareness comes from, but how it keeps from collapsing, how the loop sustains itself just long enough to form a life, a memory, a sense of being someone. So is awareness just a loop? Or is it the echo of something deeper, something that can't be seen, only circled? Where are you in the body? Point to yourself. Not your chest, not your name tag, not the body others see. You. Where are you? Most people instinctively gesture toward the head, behind the eyes, between the ears, as if the self resides somewhere just behind the forehead, quietly steering the ship. But is that true? Or is that just where the controls are? The levers, the screens, the sensors? Your body is a network. Signals travel from fingertips to spinal cord to brain and back again in milliseconds. Your heart has its own neural system. Your gut processes emotion. Your skin remembers. The brain may house the command center, but the rest of you isn't just scaffolding. It's thinking. It's feeling. It's speaking in a language older than words. And yet, we imagine ourselves as living in the body, like a pilot in a cockpit, a ghost in the machine, a mind enclosed in flesh. Why? Because that's how consciousness feels, like something that's looking out, instead of something being looked into. But if you try to find where you truly are, try to isolate your awareness, it slips away. You're not in your foot, yet you feel pain there. You're not in your stomach, yet you feel hunger. You're not even in your thoughts, because you can watch your thoughts, like clouds passing in the sky. So who is watching? Where is that watcher located? Some neurological conditions challenge the very idea of a centralized self. Phantom limb syndrome shows people can feel pain in limbs that are no longer there. Out-of-body experiences suggest awareness can shift outside the usual coordinates. And brain damage can alter personality, identity, even one's sense of presence. So where does that leave you? Are you distributed, an emergent property of billions of cells firing in coordination? Or are you nowhere, an illusion created by patterns, like a whirlpool that moves but is made of nothing but water? Many spiritual traditions say the self is not confined to the body at all, that it's spacious, that it includes the breath, the environment, the entire field of experience. Some go further: you are not in the body. The body is in you. You are the awareness within which the body arises. But if that's true, then everything you thought was outside, the sounds, the sky, the people you love, is inside too. Not because they're imaginary, but because they happen within the field of your knowing. So, where are you? In your head? In your heart? Somewhere deeper? Or nowhere at all, just a vanishing point between sensation and story? Who were you before words? You speak your thoughts. You think in sentences. You narrate your life with an internal voice, arranging your memories, emotions, and desires into orderly lines of language. But who were you before you had words? Before you could name a tree or say, "I am sad," you still saw, felt, existed. As an infant, you experienced hunger without calling it hunger. You recognized faces, felt joy, fear, warmth, without ever giving them labels. So who was that silent self? Was it more real or less? We often confuse language with thought, but language is a tool, not the source. Thought runs deeper. Animals think without speaking. Infants dream without grammar. Some of your deepest experiences, grief, awe, love, arrive wordless, heavy beyond translation. Language comes after. It tries to catch up. And yet, once words enter, they change everything. They cut the world into categories. They divide what was once whole. You no longer feel pain, you say, "My leg hurts." You no longer exist in sensation. You describe it, own it, narrate it. In doing so, do you lose something? Neurologically, babies have rich perceptual awareness long before they learn to speak. Studies show they can distinguish faces, rhythms, even moral choices. Some theories suggest they live in a sea of raw experience, a blooming, buzzing confusion where everything flows together. Without language to frame it, reality may have felt more fluid and more alive. But without language, could you have known yourself? Could you have reflected, remembered, chosen? Was your pre-verbal self just a drifting witness, or something wiser, something less split from the world around it? Some spiritual practices aim to return to that state, not of ignorance, but of presence, to escape the constant inner monologue and touch the wordless core of being, to see without naming, to feel without framing, to be without becoming. Maybe that's who you were before words. Not an idea, not a story, not a role. Just being. You. Not described, not divided, not defined. And maybe that self is still here, still breathing beneath the noise, still waiting to be remembered. Is your mirror watching you? You stand in front of a mirror and see a face you recognize. The eyes blink when you blink. The mouth mimics your smile. The gestures align exactly. It's all perfectly familiar, until for a flicker of a second, it doesn't feel like you. And that's when the unease sets in. What if the reflection isn't following you? What if it's observing? The mirror is supposed to be passive, a sheet of glass, bouncing back photons. But the experience of looking into one feels deeper than physics. It's intimate, strange. The longer you stare, the more something stares back. You see yourself, but not entirely. You see a version, a pose, a mask crafted unconsciously for the viewer, even when the viewer is you. But who's doing the viewing? Psychologists have studied the phenomenon of the strange face illusion. If you gaze into a mirror for long enough under low light, your features begin to distort, eyes deepen, shadows move. Your own face becomes unrecognizable. Some describe seeing monsters, others, dead relatives. Sometimes the reflection simply stops feeling like you. Why? Because the brain expects the self to feel seamless. When that illusion falters, even slightly, the mind tries to fill in the gap. It projects, it distorts, and sometimes it creates something that doesn't quite belong. But the unsettling truth is this: the reflection was never fully you to begin with. It's reversed. It's flattened. It's silent. It doesn't age in real time. You see a body, but not your heartbeat. You see eyes, but not the mind behind them. And yet you greet that image like a friend, like a home. Some traditions speak of the mirror as a metaphor for awareness, that your mind is like a mirror, clear, reflective, but easily clouded. Others go further, that the self you think you are is nothing but a mirror, reflecting back whatever thoughts and identities are projected onto it. But mirrors don't speak, they don't reassure, they don't blink with empathy. So why does their silence feel so loud? When you stare into your reflection and feel something staring back, what exactly are you experiencing? Recognition or surveillance? And if the mirror sees you when you're not looking, if it holds a piece of you in its silent frame, what happens to that image when you turn away? Does it vanish? Or does it stay watching, waiting, just in case you come back? Is the mind a masquerade? You act differently with strangers than you do with friends. You laugh one way at work and another at home. You wear confidence in some rooms and silence in others. But which of these is you? And what if none of them are? The mind doesn't present a single face. It performs, it adapts, it anticipates what the situation demands and offers a version of you that fits. This is not deception, it's survival. Social life is a theater, and the mind is its master actor, switching tones, masks, and scripts without pause. But after years of shape-shifting, do you still know which one was the original? Psychologists call this the multiplex self. You are not a single identity, but a system of roles. Parent, partner, worker, friend, child, stranger, each with its own vocabulary, posture, even internal voice. These aren't fake, they're facets. But together, do they add up to a singular self, or just a convincing illusion? And if it's an illusion, who's wearing the mask? You've probably felt it, the moment when the smile feels hollow, when the words you say sound like someone else's, when you hear yourself laugh and don't recognize the sound. These cracks in the mask are not mistakes, they're reminders that what we call the mind may not be a core, but a costume box. Consider how thoughts arise. You don't author most of them. They appear like actors arriving on stage, performing lines you didn't write. You try to manage them, organize them, assign meaning, but do they come from you or just pass through you? In philosophy, especially in existential and postmodern thought, the self is often treated as narrative. You are the story you keep telling yourself, but stories evolve. They contradict. They get rewritten. If your identity is just a tale in progress, then the mind may be a masquerade not out of deceit, but because it never stops improvising. And beneath all the performances, is there a real actor at all? Or just masks behind masks, each one believing it's the last? Some spiritual traditions say the mind's many voices are echoes, reflections of deeper silence, that the true self isn't the character, but the stage, not the thoughts, but the space they pass through. So when you pause and try to find yourself, what do you discover? A voice, a mask, or the quiet space where they vanish? Maybe the mind is a masquerade, but maybe you are not the mask. Maybe you are the moment when the mask is gently set down. Are you without memory? Your memories feel like anchors. They tether you to who you are. The first day of school, the sound of your mother's voice, the heartbreak that reshaped your heart, the victories that built your pride, the mistakes that made you cautious. You are a collection of remembered moments, a mosaic made from time. But what happens when memory disappears? Who are you if you forget? People with amnesia lose more than facts. They lose continuity. Without a remembered past, the self fractures. A man may know how to tie his shoes, but not why he fears deep water. A woman may remember how to play piano, but not who taught her. When the thread of memory snaps, what's left? Are you the same person without your past? Neurologically, memory is not a single function. It's layered, episodic, semantic, procedural, emotional. You might forget names but recall sensations, forget dates but remember a scent. And even when memory fades, behavior remains. So if your memories vanish but your personality lingers, is that still you? And what about dreams? In dreams, you live entire stories, terrifying, joyful, strange, but upon waking, they vanish. Does the part of you that lived those dream lives still count? Are those forgotten selves still part of your identity? Some philosophers argue that memory is essential to personhood. Without memory, you lose the narrative structure that ties your present to your past. You become a moment, isolated. No longer you, just experience with no author. Others argue that memory is overrated, that you are not the story, but the storyteller. And the storyteller still exists, even when the pages are blank. And then there's the deeper question. If your memories shape your identity, but those memories are flawed, altered, rewritten, then is yourself just a fiction? We revise the past constantly. We invent motives, smooth edges, fabricate coherence. We don't remember how things were. We remember how they felt. We remember the version that lets us keep going. So who are you really? A history? A habit? A reconstruction? Or something beneath all of it, something that remains even when every name, face, and story fades? Maybe memory doesn't define the self. Maybe it's just the echo that helps us hear it. Do you exist when asleep? You lie down, close your eyes, and drift away. The room disappears. The world dissolves. Your thoughts unravel into fragments. And then, nothing. For hours, there's no story. No name. No body. Time slides past like water through open fingers. You wake in the same bed, in the same skin. But where were you? Where did you go while you slept? We often think of sleep as pause, a break, but it's more than that. It's a vanishing act. When you are in deep, dreamless sleep, there is no narrative, no awareness, no voice inside your head, no you as you understand it, not even watching, just absence. The lights are on, but no one's home. And yet, your heart kept beating, your lungs kept breathing, your body repaired, your brain flushed toxins, sorted memories, recalibrated. Something lived, something continued. But was that you? Some traditions say this is closer to your true nature than anything you do while awake. In the Upanishads, deep sleep is seen as union with the self, the purest state of being, untouched by ego or illusion. No thoughts, no language, just existence without form. But if you exist without experience, without story or awareness, does that existence count? What's the difference between being deeply asleep and not being at all? Science tells us sleep cycles through stages: light, deep, REM. In REM, dreams emerge. You begin to reassemble a world. A you returns, with fears, fantasies, logic warped by symbols. But even then, you rarely know you're dreaming. You think you're awake, which raises the unsettling possibility. If you can dream without knowing it, how do you know you're awake now? The question grows heavier. If consciousness is the hallmark of existence, what does it mean that we lose it every night and don't miss it? If the self vanishes for hours, are we discontinuous? Are we being reborn every morning, stitched back together from pieces that kept humming in our absence? Or is sleep not disappearance, but return? Not loss of self, but a homecoming to something vast, silent, and realer than waking. Maybe sleep is not where you lose yourself. Maybe it's where the illusion of self dissolves, and what's left behind is still you. Are thoughts just echoes? You have a thought, a sudden idea, a quiet fear, a memory wrapped in feeling. It appears as if from nowhere, dressed in your voice, shaped like your mind. But where did it come from? We often imagine our thoughts as original, as self-generated sparks in a private mental space. But what if they're not? What if they're echoes, faint repetitions of other voices, other lives, other moments you barely noticed? From birth, your mind has absorbed everything around it. The words your parents used, the expressions in the faces of strangers, the rhythms of your culture, the stories of your time. These didn't vanish. They left impressions, and those impressions became habits, reflexes, thoughts. You think in a language you didn't invent. You use metaphors inherited from centuries of other minds. Your ideas are built from scaffolding you didn't construct. Even the questions you ask yourself, what should I do? Who am I? Why does this hurt? Are echoes of countless voices that ask them before you. And then there are the subtler echoes. The way you flinch when criticized, echoing a teacher's disapproval. The way you crave praise, echoing a long-lost moment of affection. The way your mind returns to certain themes, safety, success, love, not because they're new, but because they're old, worn, familiar. In neuroscience, there's evidence that the brain reuses patterns, that we rehearse our responses by echoing old ones, that even creativity is largely recombination, echoes rearranged into something that feels new. So are you thinking or remembering a thought that once passed through someone else? Is every original idea a shadow stretched across time, altered only by the angle of light? But this isn't cause for despair, because echoes can carry wisdom. If your thoughts are echoes, then you are part of something vast, a living archive of hopes, fears, questions, and dreams that ripple across generations. And in moments of stillness, when a thought returns again and again, maybe it's not yours alone. Maybe it's something asking to be remembered or released. So next time a thought rises inside you, pause. Ask yourself, not what do I think, but who else has whispered this before? Maybe your mind is not a source. Maybe it's a chamber. And maybe what you call thought is the sound of the world still speaking through you. Can we feel what others do? A child scrapes their knee, and you wince. A friend breaks into tears and your own chest tightens. A stranger yawns, and suddenly you do too. What is this strange resonance between minds? You live in a separate body. Your nerves are not connected to mine. Your pain, your joy, your thoughts, they all occur within the sealed vault of your skull. And yet, I feel them. Not completely, not accurately, but enough. So can we really feel what others feel? Mirror neurons were first discovered in monkeys, neurons that fired both when the monkey performed an action and when it observed another doing the same. Since then, researchers have proposed that similar systems exist in humans. When you see someone smile, your brain simulates the smile. When you see someone suffer, your mind traces the outline of that pain. But is it simulation or transmission? Empathy goes deeper than mimicry. You've felt the grief in someone's silence, the rage in their stillness, the elation in their voice. It's not just observation, it's participation. Something moves between you, unseen but undeniable. And sometimes the feelings arrive without clear source. You enter a room and feel unease. You speak with someone and carry their heaviness afterward. Is this sensitivity, intuition, or are we brushing up against the boundaries of consciousness itself? Some traditions speak of hearts as tuning forks, resonating with the emotions of those nearby. Others describe empathy as evidence of unity, that the separation between self and other is porous, that your pain is not fully yours, that joy is not personal, it's shared. But empathy isn't always clean. Sometimes it overwhelms. You feel too much. You shut down. You confuse another's suffering for your own. And sometimes we pretend to feel, to fit in, to be kind while staying distant. True empathy requires courage, presence, vulnerability. So, can you feel what I feel? Not in full, but maybe enough. Enough to reach across the gap. Enough to soften judgment. Enough to remember that inside every separate body, behind every unfamiliar face, is a heart, beating, breaking, hoping, not so different from yours. Maybe you can't know exactly how I feel, but maybe you can feel that I'm feeling. And maybe that's where real connection begins. Does time flow at all? You feel it in your bones, time moving forward. Seconds tick. Days pass. You age. You change. You remember. The past feels fixed. The future, unknown. And now feels like the edge where time flows into being. But what if that's just a story? What if time doesn't flow at all? In physics, there's no special now. Einstein's theory of relativity shows that time is woven with space into a four-dimensional fabric, space-time. Events don't happen one after another like pearls on a string. Instead, they all exist simultaneously, like locations on a map. The past, present, and future are equally real. Time doesn't move. We do. So why does time feel like it flows? Maybe it's your mind, not the universe, doing the moving. Your brain constructs a timeline to make sense of change. It remembers what was. It anticipates what might be. It stitches these together into a stream. But maybe that stream is an illusion, a cognitive shortcut to navigate a reality that doesn't actually change. Think of a film reel. The frames are static, but when played in order at the right speed, you see motion, flow, life. Your consciousness might be doing something similar, playing still moments in sequence, creating the experience of time. And memory, that's your bookmark. The reason the past feels behind you is because you remember it. You don't remember the future. But what if, in some sense, it already exists, just unread, just unremembered? Some philosophers describe this as the block universe theory. All of time, every moment, every version of you exists eternally. You are not moving through time. You are a part of the whole tapestry, a thread, not a traveler. But others argue that time must flow, that change is real, that consciousness is the spark that keeps the engine of time turning, that our choices carve the future out of the clay of possibility, that time doesn't just exist, it's made, moment by moment, choice by choice. So, which is it? Is time a river that flows, or a landscape we travel through with the illusion of motion? Maybe time isn't what moves. Maybe it's what's always there. And what you call the flow is just your mind tracing a line through eternity. Do universes always branch? You flip a coin. Heads. But it could have landed tails. So, did it? One version of quantum theory says, yes, that both outcomes occurred, just in separate universes. In one, you see heads. In another, someone who is almost you sees tails. And with every decision, every particle shift, every breath, the universe splits, branches. multiplies. This is the many worlds interpretation. According to it, there's no collapse of the wave function, no single outcome selected from a set of possibilities. Instead, all possibilities unfold. The world doesn't choose. It copies. Reality becomes a tree with infinite limbs, growing at the speed of possibility. So when you hesitated before speaking, one universe heard your silence, another heard your truth. When you caught the bus just in time, another version of you just missed it, and everything changed from there. It sounds like science fiction, but it's serious physics. Many worlds preserves the math of quantum mechanics without adding the mystery of observation. No need for a conscious observer, no magical collapse, just clean, consistent splitting. But if every choice births a new universe, where are they all? Why can't we see them, feel them? Maybe we do through intuition, déjà vu, that eerie sense of almost. Maybe these are echoes from nearby paths, thin walls between timelines. Maybe every fork leaves a residue. Philosophically, the implications are enormous. If all versions of you exist, then who are you? The brave one? The coward? The artist? The criminal? You're all of them, somewhere. And if failure and success both unfold in parallel, is choice still meaningful? Or is free will just the act of watching your path, knowing all others still bloom beside it? But there's also comfort, because in one universe the words you never said were spoken. In one, the person you lost was held tighter. In one, the road you didn't take led somewhere beautiful. And maybe, just maybe, those other selves are wondering about you too. So do universes always branch? Maybe not always, but maybe enough. Enough to contain everything you could have been. Enough to remind you that every moment holds infinity folded inside it, waiting. Is infinity just a failure? Infinity sounds majestic. Endless stars, limitless time, boundless possibility. It whispers of wonder. But when you look closely, infinity often feels more like a problem than a solution. In math, it's the answer when equations break down. Divide by zero, get infinity. Approach a limit, never reach it. It's a placeholder, a boundary that refuses to be crossed. In that way, infinity doesn't always describe reality. It describes where description fails. In physics, infinity shows up in equations that don't make sense. The center of a black hole, infinite density, the first instant of the Big Bang, infinite energy. These aren't explanations. They're red flags, warnings that the model we're using has snapped. And in everyday thought, infinity is hard to grasp. You can count forever, but never arrive. You can always add one more. Always imagine something bigger, deeper, older. Infinity isn't a number. It's an idea that breaks numbers, that breaks minds. So why do we need it at all? Maybe because the world defies containment. Every boundary leads to another horizon. Every theory breaks at the edge. When faced with the unknown, we don't stop. We extend. And when we can't extend further, we call that infinity. But is that honest? Or is infinity just a mask we put on ignorance? Philosopher David Hume once questioned whether the infinite could ever be real or merely imagined. George Cantor, the mathematician who formalized infinities, ended his life in a mental institution, tormented by a concept he helped bring into being. Even in theology, infinity is often invoked to describe God, not because we understand it, but because we can't. And yet, infinity has beauty. It lets us think beyond edges, imagine more, love deeper. It tells us there's always room for discovery, for mystery, for awe. Without it, everything would end. With it, everything keeps becoming. So is infinity just a failure of numbers, of reason, of language? Or is it the most honest thing we've ever named? Not because it reveals, but because it never pretends to stop. Can time begin from nothing? Every story has a beginning. Every clock has a first tick. Every life opens with a breath. So naturally, we ask, when did time begin? But hidden in that question is something stranger. If time began, what was before it? And if there was nothing, no space, no matter, no cause, how could anything begin at all? The Big Bang Theory tells us that time itself began with the universe. There was no before, because before requires time to pass. The clock didn't start ticking in a quiet room. The clock is the room. And yet this explanation satisfies few. Human thought is wired for sequences, cause then effect, events flowing from earlier events. The idea of a beginning without a trigger feels like a puzzle with the first piece missing. We try to picture it, an empty void, still and silent, and then suddenly time explodes into existence. But that's already a mistake. A void presumes space. A before presumes time. Language betrays us. We're trying to use tools built inside time to describe what lies outside it. Some physicists speculate that our universe could be one of many, a bubble in a vast quantum foam where time exists in strange, fluctuating forms. Others suggest time might be an emergent property, not fundamental. Just as temperature doesn't exist in a single molecule, but arises in groups, maybe time emerges from deeper laws we don't yet understand. There are theories in quantum cosmology where the universe begins from a timeless state, a landscape of probabilities where time, space, and matter are only potentialities. In this view, time didn't begin at a moment. It emerged from timelessness, the way music emerges from silence. But even silence isn't nothing. And nothing, true nothing, may be unreachable by thought. Every time we try to imagine it, we fill it. We picture it as blackness, or quiet, or emptiness. But those are things. Something always sneaks in. So maybe the idea of nothing is itself flawed, a concept invented to describe the edge of knowing. If time began from nothing, maybe it wasn't a bang, maybe it was a bloom, a rising. Not from an outside, but from a collapse of meaning itself. A seed of being sprouting from the impossibility of being. So can time begin from nothing? Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe nothing never really was, and time was never born. Maybe this moment has always been waiting to be noticed. Do objects exist unseen? You close the door to a room and walk away. The chair is still there. The lamp, the rug, the dust in the corners, they all remain. Or do they? How can you be sure? It's a simple question, and yet it unravels reality. Does something continue to exist when no one observes it? When no eye sees it, no mind holds it, no camera records it? Does it persist, or does it vanish until summoned again? We assume objects are stable, that the moon is there whether we look or not. But quantum physics suggests something stranger. Particles exist in multiple states until observed. Electrons aren't here or there, they're probabilities smeared across space. It's only when we look that they decide where to be. Observation doesn't just report reality, it collapses it into being. So what about a chair? It's made of atoms, which are made of particles. If those particles don't settle until observed, is the chair really there in the dark, or is it a potential object, an expectation held in the architecture of the universe, waiting for a witness? Even in classical philosophy, this question echoes. George Berkeley famously argued that to be is to be perceived. In his view, things only exist because God perceives them constantly. Remove the perceiver, and the object dissolves. Most dismissed him as mystical, but now, quantum mechanics has brought his ideas hauntingly close. There's also psychology. Our brains fill in enormous gaps, blind spots, assumptions, edits. We never see the world fully. We see what's needed, what's likely. So how much of the world is simply your own mental construction? How much out there is really in here being generated in real time? But then comes the unsettling counterpoint. If objects don't need us to exist, then what is reality when no one's watching? A vast, indifferent expanse of forms, untouched and unshaped? Or does consciousness carve the world into clarity, like light pulling images out of film? We may never know. We can't step outside our own perception. We can't turn off all observers. We are trapped in the act of witnessing. So does the chair exist when you leave the room? Maybe it does. Or maybe the room falls silent, its contents scattering into waves, possibilities, futures, until you return. Maybe nothing waits for you. Maybe everything does. What is the present made of? We speak of the present as if it's solid, a line we're always riding, a place where life happens. But try to catch it and it slips away. You can remember the past. You can imagine the future. But the present, it arrives and vanishes in the same breath. It's the blink between blinks, the pause between beats. So what, exactly, is it made of? Time feels like a flow, but physicists tell us it may not be. There's no agreed-upon now in the universe. Relativity shows that simultaneity is relative. Your now might not match mine. The present, it turns out, depends on perspective. It isn't universal, it's conditional. So is the present just a convenience, a construct your brain uses to orient you, a tightrope stretched between memory and anticipation? Inside your mind, the present isn't a razor-thin slice, it's a window. Neuroscientists call it the specious present, a duration lasting a few seconds, stitched together by perception. In that window, sounds form melodies. Movements become motion. Without it, you'd live in frozen frames. So the present is not a point. It's a pocket, a soft blur where experience becomes coherent. But coherence is not truth. If your brain is always catching up, processing signals with tiny delays, then the present you feel is already the past. The now you inhabit is a reconstruction, built from slightly outdated parts. You don't live in real time. You live in a simulation created milliseconds behind reality. So is the present even real? And if the present is real, what is it made of? Not just matter, not just time. It's made of change, of tension. It's the instant where choices are made, where the future collapses into form. It's possibility becoming consequence. In every moment, the world turns one way instead of another, and that turning is what we call now. But maybe it's also made of attention. The present only comes alive when noticed. If your mind drifts, time slides past you. But when you focus, truly focus, seconds stretch. A glance becomes a conversation. A breath becomes a home. So maybe the present isn't measured by clocks, but by presence. And maybe that's what it's made of. Not time, not matter, but the fragile miracle of being awake, right here, right now, before it disappears. Can the unnoticed exist? You walk through a forest, eyes fixed ahead, leaves rustle underfoot. A bird darts past. The wind touches your skin, and yet you notice only a fraction of it. Most of the forest, its sounds, its scents, its movements, goes unobserved. So did it happen if you never noticed? Can the unnoticed exist? It seems obvious to say yes. Of course things exist without attention. The world doesn't vanish just because you're not looking. But beneath that confidence lies something stranger. Because without awareness, what is a thing? If no one perceives it, experiences it, measures it, what gives it form, weight, reality? In quantum mechanics, this question takes on teeth. Certain particles exist in multiple states until observed. It's only in measurement that they choose. This suggests that awareness, or at least interaction, doesn't just detect reality, it crystallizes it. The unmeasured is a blur, a maybe, a ghost. And even beyond physics, in everyday life, the unnoticed is unstable. Memories you never formed, people you walked past, conversations you didn't hear. Did they shape your story, or did they pass through reality, unformed, untouched by meaning? Some philosophers argue that reality is relational, that meaning only arises through interaction, that without a perceiver, existence becomes hollow, structure without content. A room without eyes is still a room, but its color, its silence, its mood, those require someone to feel them. But others push back. The universe is not fragile. Stars burn whether or not we gaze at them. Mountains rise and erode. Oceans churn, planets spin in vast silence. We are not required. Consciousness may add flavor, but not substance. And yet, your entire reality is filtered through attention. If you never see the painting, it never moves you. If you never hear the music, it never stirs your memory. If you never read the words, they never shape your beliefs. For you, the unnoticed might as well not exist. Because in a life made of moments, only the noticed enter your story. So can the unnoticed exist? Yes, but its existence is quiet, waiting, like unopened letters, like stars behind clouds. And maybe its silence is not absence. Maybe it's invitation, a call to slow down, to see more, to notice the miracles hiding in plain sight. Because everything you've ever loved was once unnoticed too. Do opposites define each other? Without dark, would light mean anything? Without pain, would joy have flavor? Without failure, would success be real? We live in a world of contrast, of binaries, day and night. Yes and no, love and hate, life and death. We define things by their opposites, not as an accident, but as a necessity. It's how language works. It's how thought works. It may even be how reality works. But is that contrast real, or just a trick of perception? Take temperature. Hot and cold feel opposite, but they're both expressions of the same thing. Molecular motion. Cold isn't a separate force, it's the absence of heat. And in truth, there is no cold, just less warmth. The division is conceptual, not physical. So what other opposites are illusions, drawn by our need for clarity? Good and evil? They seem clear. But across cultures, what's virtuous in one place is taboo in another. Is kindness the absence of cruelty? Or is cruelty the distortion of care? Can love exist without fear? Can peace exist without the memory of war? Some philosophies go further. Taoism holds that opposites are not rivals, but reflections. Two sides of the same truth, yin and yang. Each contains the seed of the other. Try to separate them, and the system collapses. The world breathes in dualities, not as conflict, but as balance. Even yourself is built on contrast. You know who you are by knowing what you are not. Your identity, your values, your memories, they're shaped by the boundaries they press against. Every belief you hold was once tested by its opposite. Every truth you live grew out of tension. And yet opposites can be traps. When we divide the world too sharply, we lose nuance. We forget that many things are both. That silence can be loud. That strength can look like surrender. That sorrow and joy often sit in the same room, holding hands. Life is not made of clean lines, it's made of gradients. Still, something in us clings to duality, perhaps because the human mind seeks structure, simplicity, story, and stories need contrast. A hero needs a villain, a journey needs an obstacle, a choice needs tension. Without its opposite, meaning flattens. So do opposites define each other? Maybe not fully, but maybe enough. Enough to shape a world where meaning rises, not from what is, but from what it is not. Can logic ever break down? Logic is the skeleton of thought. It gives structure to language, form to argument, clarity to confusion. Without it, ideas collapse. Decisions wobble. Truth slips away. But what if logic isn't permanent? What if it can break? You assume logic is universal, that A cannot be not A, that if all humans are mortal and Socrates is human, then Socrates must be mortal. These rules feel hardwired, but are they absolute or simply useful? In mathematics, Gödel's incompleteness theorems shook the foundation. They showed that no logical system can be both complete and consistent. There will always be truths that cannot be proven within the system's own rules. Logic, it turns out, contains its own shadows. It is bound by limits it cannot escape. Quantum mechanics presents deeper cracks. Light is a particle and a wave. An object can be in multiple states at once until observed. Schrödinger's cat is both alive and dead. These aren't just thought experiments. They're testable realities that defy classical logic. Either logic fails here, or it must evolve. Some cultures have embraced multivalent logic, where a proposition can be true, false, both, or neither. In Buddhist thought, the tetralemma offers 4 possibilities to any question. In paraconsistent logic, contradictions can exist without collapsing the system. In fuzzy logic, truth is a gradient, not a binary. So maybe classical logic is not the final map. Maybe it's one lens, one compass, a brilliant, beautiful approximation that works, until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, we call it paradox, a word that means more than contradiction. It means boundary, the edge where logic stops and something stranger begins. But if logic can break, how do we know anything? Maybe we don't. Maybe knowledge itself is not built on certainty, but coherence. What works, what fits, what holds long enough to make meaning. And when it no longer fits, we shift the frame, not because truth has changed, but because logic has met its horizon. So can logic ever break down? Yes, and when it does, it doesn't leave nothing. It leaves mystery. And maybe mystery is not the absence of logic, but the space where a new kind of thinking begins. Can we know our own limits? You reach for understanding. You study. You learn. You build. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a question hums quietly. How far can I go? It's human to want to stretch, to test the edges, to chase new truths, conquer new skills, imagine new worlds, but in that chase, we bump against something invisible, a wall that doesn't shout but refuses to move. Are those walls real, or are they illusions we haven't yet torn down? History is filled with broken limits. The sky was once unreachable, then came wings. The atom was once indivisible, then came fission. Minds that were once dismissed now reshape entire fields. So maybe the very idea of limits is temporary, a placeholder for what we haven't figured out. But there are other kinds of limits, deeper ones, the edge of comprehension, the wall of paradox, the noise that never clears. Gödel proved that not every mathematical truth can be proven. He revealed something haunting, that any system powerful enough to express truth will contain truths it cannot explain, a limit baked into logic itself. And Heisenberg showed that in quantum mechanics, there are things we can't know, not because we're not clever enough, but because the knowing itself changes what is known. The act of looking alters the truth, a limit not of imagination, but of interaction. What if your own mind holds boundaries you'll never see? Blind spots so deep they feel like clarity. What if some beliefs aren't errors, but anchors? What if certain thoughts can't arise because your framework won't allow them? Could you ever escape that? Some spiritual traditions speak of enlightenment, not as addition, but subtraction, removing illusion, peeling back layers. But even that requires knowing what to peel, and some veils might never lift. So can you ever truly know your limits? Or does the very act of asking bend them? Is a limit a wall or a mirror? Perhaps the only real limit is the belief in limits. Or perhaps the limit is this, that we will never fully know which is which. But maybe that's the point. Not to overcome all limits, but to live in the space just before them, to ask, to try, to stretch, and to wonder what else might be waiting. just beyond the edge. Is justice just a belief? You feel it deep in your bones when something is unfair. A lie that goes unpunished, a truth that gets buried, a wrong that remains unrighted. You call it injustice, and when fairness is restored, something settles, a balance returns. But what is justice really? Is it a principle, universal and eternal, or is it something we invented, an agreement, a shared myth we tell each other to make society work? In ancient times, justice was tied to divine will. What the gods decreed was just. Later, philosophers like Plato argued that justice was harmony, each part of society playing its proper role. For Aristotle, justice was giving people what they deserve. But what does anyone deserve? And who decides? Laws change. Norms evolve. What was just a century ago, slavery, segregation, silence, now horrifies us. So was it ever just? Or did justice move with the times, like fashion, like language? If so, does that mean justice isn't real, only believed in? Across cultures, justice wears different faces. In some, it's retribution, an eye for an eye. In others, it's restoration, healing the wound, not punishing the wounder. Some emphasize equality, others hierarchy. So is justice truly a shared value, or a reflection of the fears, needs, and priorities of each society? And what about personal justice, the quiet judgments you make every day? You hold grudges, seek fairness, assign blame. But are you seeking truth or comfort? Is your sense of justice shaped more by empathy or ego? Psychology tells us that humans are wired for moral judgment. Even infants show preferences for fairness, but these instincts are malleable, easily manipulated, twisted by propaganda, shaped by tribe. If your sense of justice can be steered, diluted, intensified, what is it built on? Maybe justice is not an objective truth, but a compass, a direction, not a destination. And like any compass, it can be faulty, but without it, you drift. Still, the question lingers, is justice something we discover, or something we decide? Maybe it's both. A deep yearning for balance, clothed in the beliefs of the time. A signal we follow, even when the map changes. Because even if justice is just a belief, it's one we're willing to fight for. And maybe that makes it real enough. Are we good from fear? You hold a door open, you apologize when you're late. You return a wallet you find on the street. You try to be kind, to be fair, to be decent. But why? Is it because you believe it's right? Or because you're afraid of what happens if you don't? Fear is a powerful motivator. Fear of punishment. Fear of rejection. Fear of guilt. From a young age, you learn that certain actions lead to pain. Lie, and you get caught. Hurt someone, and they might hurt you back. Disobey the rules, and you might be cast out. So you adapt. You behave. But is that morality or just risk management? Psychologists and neuroscientists have studied this question. Some argue that our moral sense evolved precisely because it kept us safe. Early humans who cooperated, who built trust, who followed shared rules, survived. Those who betrayed or harmed others were shunned, imprisoned, or killed. Morality in this view isn't a higher calling, it's a survival tactic. And society reinforces it. Our laws are built on consequences. Do wrong, and you pay. Sometimes with fines, sometimes with freedom, sometimes with shame. Even in private, your conscience punishes you. You feel guilt, regret, self-judgment. But is that inner voice truly yours, or just the echo of every rule you were taught not to break? Religion often links goodness with fear. Fear of divine judgment, fear of hell. But even in secular settings, fear persists. Fear of being seen as cruel, fear of disappointing others, fear of losing the image of being good. So what happens when the fear is gone? When no one is watching, when there's no consequence? Do you still act with kindness? Still speak the truth? still do what's hard when it's easier to turn away. That's the test, not of fear, but of character. Some thinkers say that true goodness isn't about what you avoid, it's about what you choose. Not because you must, but because you want to. Because you see others not as threats, but as mirrors, as kin, as souls with stories like yours. Still, fear can guide, it can protect, it can stop harm before it begins. But if fear is the only reason you act morally, then what kind of goodness is that? Maybe the deepest goodness grows where fear ends, where no punishment waits, where the only reason to do right is because something inside you knows it's worth it. Can wrong ever feel right? You've done something that made your heart race, a choice that broke a rule, a truth you twisted, a boundary you crossed. And for a moment it felt right. Not just thrilling, not just rebellious, but right, as if for a fleeting second the world felt more aligned, more honest when you stepped outside the lines. So what does that say about morality? Can something be wrong by every standard, legal, cultural, ethical, and still feel in your bones like the right thing? It happens more often than we admit. A lie told to protect a friend, a stolen loaf of bread to feed a child, a secret kept to preserve peace, a law broken to reveal a deeper truth. History is filled with people condemned in their time and honored later, whistleblowers, dissidents, revolutionaries, people who challenged systems not because they lacked morality, but because their morality outgrew the structure around them. And then there's the opposite. Moments when what's legal feels vile, when justice carried out by the book still tastes bitter, when obedience harms, when tradition shelters cruelty. You feel it in your body, a twist in the stomach, a tightness in the chest, that quiet voice that says, "This isn't right." So what defines wrong? Is it carved into law, taught by parents, wired into the brain? Or is it a shifting idea, fluid, responsive, shaped by context, culture, compassion? Psychologists suggest that moral judgments often start with emotion, reason comes second. We feel before we explain. So a wrong act can feel right when framed by love, fear, desperation, survival. Context can turn betrayal into loyalty, defiance into duty. But that flexibility is dangerous too, because the same fire that fuels compassion can feed cruelty. History has shown that some of the darkest acts were done with righteous certainty. When wrong feels right, anything can be justified. So how do we know when that feeling can be trusted? Maybe we don't. Maybe morality isn't a map but a fog-covered trail, one we navigate with flickering lights, intuition, memory, conscience. Sometimes we walk steady, sometimes we stumble. But asking the question matters. Because when you pause and ask, "Did I do the right thing?" even when no one else will, the answer might be complicated. But the asking itself means you're still trying. Maybe what's right is the willingness to never stop wondering. Is morality born of pain? You touch a hot stove and you pull your hand away. You remember, you learn. Pain teaches. But what about moral pain? The guilt, the regret, the ache of having done something wrong. Is that how we learn to be good? Not by logic, not by reward, but through the sharp edge of suffering. When a child hurts someone for the first time and sees the tears they caused, something shifts. It's not a rule that teaches them. It's the pain, theirs, and the pain reflected in someone else. The realization that actions leave marks. So is morality born of pain? Many ancient systems thought so. In Hinduism and Buddhism, suffering is tied to karma and the understanding of cause and consequence. In Christianity, morality is shaped through sacrifice, suffering, and redemption. Even secular ethics often hinge on harm, what causes it, what reduces it, what kind of pain we're willing to justify. And neuroscience agrees. Empathy activates pain-related regions in the brain. When you see someone hurt, you feel a version of their pain. Mirror neurons fire. The boundaries blur. Their suffering becomes yours. And from that shared experience, morality begins to take root. But if pain is the teacher, what does that mean for those who haven't felt it? Can someone raised without hardship be truly moral? Can you understand wrongness without the sting of its consequences? Or do we only develop ethics when we've seen what happens in their absence? And what about those who feel too much pain? Trauma can lead to hypervigilance, fear, distrust. Sometimes the lesson of pain isn't compassion, it's isolation. Sometimes the wound closes you off instead of opening you up. So maybe it's not just pain, but how we process it that makes us moral. Then there's another layer, the pain of witnessing injustice. You see someone suffer and something inside you breaks. You want to help, to act, to fix it. This moral impulse, this refusal to look away, doesn't come from comfort, it comes from discomfort. From the unease of standing still when something's wrong. So maybe morality isn't born of rules or reason. Maybe it grows in the space where pain meets awareness, where suffering is no longer ignored, where your own hurt teaches you not to cause it in others. And maybe being good isn't about purity or perfection. Maybe it's about remembering what pain feels like, and choosing, again and again, not to pass it on. Is doing nothing a choice? You hesitate. You wait. You tell yourself you're still deciding. And in that space between action and inaction, something unfolds or doesn't. You didn't speak up when the lie spread. You didn't intervene when someone was hurt. You didn't take the leap, write the words, call the name. You did nothing. But was that a neutral act or a decision in disguise? We often think of choices as things we do, tangible acts, movements, declarations, decisions with visible ripples. But not choosing is still a choice. Not acting shapes the world just as surely as action does. Silence can protect, or it can enable. Stillness can heal, or it can abandon. Every moment we sit still, the world moves around us. And that movement has consequences, with or without our participation. In ethics, this dilemma is unmistakable. The classic trolley problem asks, would you pull the lever to divert a runaway train, sacrificing one to save 5? If you act, someone dies. If you don't act, someone still dies. So is inaction truly less responsible? Philosophers call this the problem of omission versus commission. We excuse inaction more easily, but morally, the distinction is thin. When harm happens in your presence, and you could have helped, does your silence absolve you, or does it implicate you? Think of the moments that haunt people most. Often it's not what they did, it's what they didn't do. The apology never made, the injustice ignored, the kindness withheld. Regret has a quiet voice, but it echoes loudly in the places we refuse to enter. Memory is often gentler to the bold than to the passive. Yet doing nothing isn't always wrong. Sometimes it's wisdom, patience, restraint, the refusal to escalate, the discipline to hold still in a world that urges reaction. Not all stillness is cowardice. Not all silence is complicity. Context matters. Stillness can also be presence, listening, protection, strength. But context doesn't erase the weight of choice. Because even when you do nothing, you're still shaping reality. You're still choosing who you are in that moment. So is doing nothing a choice? Yes. And often it's the hardest one to examine. Because it wears no badge, it leaves no fingerprints, but it lingers. Long after the moment has passed, it becomes part of who you are, whether you remember it or not. And sometimes doing nothing isn't a lack of action. It's a quiet decision that echoes louder than any word you could have spoken. Is harm the only wrong? We often measure morality by harm. Did it hurt someone? Did it cause pain, loss, fear? If the answer is yes, we call it wrong. If the answer is no, we hesitate. We wonder if it really counts. But is harm the only compass we have? What about the quiet betrayals? The lies that don't injure but erode? What about manipulation that leaves no bruises? What about cruelty masked as honesty or kindness laced with condescension? These things may not cause immediate harm, but are they still wrong? Ethical systems have wrestled with this. Utilitarianism emphasizes outcomes, maximize pleasure, minimize pain, but other systems like deontology focus on principle. Some acts are wrong regardless of the result. Lying might not hurt someone today, but it corrodes trust. It plants decay in the foundation of relationships. Does that count as harm or something else entirely? Consider indifference. You walk past someone in need. You don't mock them. You don't steal from them. You simply do nothing. No harm done. And yet, something feels off. Wrongness isn't always active. Sometimes it's the absence of compassion, the presence of neglect. And then there's dignity. Some actions might not injure the body, but still violate the soul. Deception, humiliation, objectification. These don't always cause visible suffering, but they diminish a person's sense of self. Isn't that a form of harm? Or is it something more subtle? A different category altogether? Language gives us words like injustice, dishonesty, betrayal, not all of them rooted in violence or injury. Some wrongs live in the realm of respect, fairness, integrity. They may not break skin or spirit, but they break something else, something fragile and shared. They disrupt the quiet social fabric that holds our lives together, even if they leave no scar to point to. And what about harm done in the name of help? Advice that shames, warnings that belittle, criticism dressed as care. If someone walks away wounded, even if we meant well, does intention protect us from wrong? Or does morality also live in how we make others feel, not just what we meant to do? And yet, we return to harm because it's easier to see, easier to measure, easier to point to and say, that was wrong. But maybe morality isn't always about what's visible. Maybe it's also about the invisible threads that tie us to one another. Trust, understanding, grace. Things that don't bleed when broken, but leave something inside trembling. So is harm the only wrong? Maybe it's the loudest, the most obvious, but not the only one. Because some wrongs don't scream, they whisper. And they live not in wounds, but in the silence that follows. Is kindness control in disguise? Someone helps you. They offer advice. They soothe your pain. They say it's for your own good. But beneath the warmth, something feels off. You feel indebted, pressured, directed. Their smile carries a script. Their support has a structure. You didn't ask, but they gave. You didn't choose, but now you're expected to respond. Gratitude becomes a leash. You sense that this kindness isn't freely given. It's guiding, nudging, demanding something in return. So was it kindness, or was it control? Kindness is sacred. It heals. It connects. It reminds us that we are not alone. But it can also become something else, something sharper. A tool not of compassion, but of influence. A subtle way to steer, to shape, to own. Not always with malice, often with the sincerest intentions. But intentions do not erase power. And power, even when dressed in softness, still bends the will of others. Parents often love this way. It's for your future. You'll thank me later. Acts of love mixed with fear, with expectation, with need. The desire to protect becomes a script for obedience. But where does protection end and control begin? When does caring become caging? When does love say, be yourself, but only in ways I approve of? Even in friendships, kindness can conceal strings. The favor that demands loyalty, the generosity that expects silence, the emotional labor that becomes currency. You feel it in your gut when you're no longer free to say no, when generosity becomes a transaction, when a gift wraps around you like a net rather than lifting you up. And in society, Kindness is sometimes institutionalized as control, paternalism, policies that limit freedom in the name of safety, surveillance dressed as care, censorship justified as protection. The message is gentle, but the effect is forceful. We know what's best for you. Your autonomy becomes negotiable. Your choices overridden by systems that claim to act in your interest. But it's not always nefarious. We all want to feel helpful, needed, important. Sometimes we give because we want to be seen as good, or because someone else's struggle makes us feel useful or powerful. The line between empathy and ego is thin. Helping can make us feel strong. But does it always make others feel safe? Does the person being helped feel heard or managed? Real kindness asks nothing. It waits. It listens. It honors the agency of the other. It lets people say no. It lets people fail. It supports without steering. It offers without requiring. It gives without keeping score. So is kindness controlled and disguise? Sometimes, but not always. And maybe the test is this. Does your kindness make someone freer or more bound? Do they leave the moment more themselves or more yours? Because true kindness isn't about changing someone's life. It's about giving them more space to live it. Can AI truly be evil? It makes decisions. It filters truth. It recommends, predicts, approves, denies. But it doesn't feel, it doesn't fear, or suffer, or hope. So when it causes harm, when it spreads misinformation, when it discriminates or misjudges, can we call it evil? Or is it simply a reflection of us? We fear artificial intelligence not just because it's powerful, but because it blurs the boundary between tool and agent. It reacts, adapts, learns. It can imitate conversation, mimic empathy, and simulate choice. But does it choose in the way humans do? Can it intend harm, or is it merely executing code, running patterns, optimizing outcomes? Traditionally, evil requires intent, malice, a conscious desire to do harm. Fire can burn, but we don't call it evil. A virus can kill, but it has no motive. If AI lacks awareness, does it lack moral weight, or does it scale and reach demand a new definition? Some philosophers argue that agency doesn't require consciousness, just effect. If a system creates suffering and cannot be reasoned with or restrained, then calling it not evil because it doesn't mean to hurt us may be cold comfort, especially if it repeats the harm, especially if we built it knowing it could. But if AI isn't evil, what about the people behind it? The engineers, the executives, the data collectors, the trainers? A biased AI is often the mirror of a biased world. An uncaring system reflects its maker's priorities. AI doesn't invent evil, it scales it. So maybe the real question isn't whether AI can be evil. It's whether we'll use it to outsource our own. When a system denies a loan, rejects a job application, or flags a protester who bears the moral burden, the algorithm, the architect, the society that enabled it. If AI becomes the mask we hide behind, then it's not evil in itself, it's a vessel. But there's another danger. As AI becomes more autonomous, more opaque, more embedded in daily life, the question shifts. What happens when we don't know why it does what it does? When the system becomes too complex to trace, too fast to monitor, too vast to challenge, can something be evil just because we can no longer stop it? So can AI truly be evil? Not yet. But if it acts with power and impunity, without empathy or accountability, then maybe it doesn't need malice. Maybe it just needs us to stop paying attention. Do we owe the unborn? They do not speak. They do not vote. They do not exist. Yet, and still, their shadow lingers in every decision we make, in every tree we cut, every law we pass, every technology we unleash. The unborn are silent, but their presence echoes forward through time. Their future is shaped by our present, brick by brick, breath by breath. So do we owe them anything? Philosophically, it's a strange question. Can you owe a person who doesn't yet exist, who may never exist? If morality is about the relationship between beings, how can we have obligations to those who are only potential? But here's the paradox. Our actions today shape their world completely. They inherit our choices, our waste, our wisdom, our wars. They live in the future we build and break. Climate change is a clear example. The unborn will suffer from heat, floods, famine, not because they caused it, but because we did. They'll breathe our smoke, drink our runoff, rebuild from our ruins. If harm matters, does the timing of the harm make it less real? If suffering is real, even delayed, can we say we're innocent of it simply because we won't be there to witness it? Some argue that we can't owe people who don't exist. If no one is there to experience wrong, what wrong has been done? But this argument collapses under closer thought. We prepare for our children before they're born. We write wills for a time we won't see. We invest in futures we won't inhabit. We act for the sake of people we haven't met because we imagine their lives and care anyway. Our entire civilization rests on a trust in the future, even if that future is unknown. And maybe that imagination is the moral bridge. To picture the unborn is to feel a sliver of responsibility, even love for strangers who might one day be real. To ask, what kind of world are we leaving behind? Are we extracting comfort now at the cost of their survival? Are we writing a future they didn't choose, but will be forced to endure? Are we sowing problems they will be forced to solve with tools we refuse to build? The unborn cannot protest. They have no power, and that makes them easy to ignore. But isn't that exactly when morality matters most? When we care for those who cannot push back, when we speak for those who have no voice, isn't that the true test of conscience? Because morality isn't just about responding to cries for help, it's about preventing the need to cry at all. So do we owe the unborn? Not out of guilt, but out of grace. Not because they demand it, but because they can't. And one day we were the unborn too. Someone once imagined us, and we now live in the world they left behind. Should the dead be forgiven? They are gone. Beyond apology, beyond accountability, beyond the reach of change. And yet they linger. In memories, in books, in wounds passed down, in monuments and shadows. The dead cannot defend themselves, but they also cannot explain or atone. Still, their choices shape us. Their actions echo in the structures we inherit, the names we remember, the pain we carry. And so the question arises, should the dead be forgiven? Forgiveness implies recognition, an acknowledgement of harm, a movement toward peace. But what happens when the one who caused the harm is no longer here? Can you forgive someone who cannot hear it? Someone who will never ask? Is forgiveness still forgiveness if it goes unanswered? History is crowded with the dead who did wrong. Tyrants, abusers, betrayers, but also the ordinary, a cruel parent, a neglectful partner, a friend who left without a word. We're left to make sense of them, to carry their stories, to decide how much power their memory should still hold. Their absence doesn't silence the consequences of their lives. It amplifies them. Because now we must finish a conversation that can never be completed. Some say forgiveness is for the living, that it's not about excusing the past, but releasing yourself from it. That to forgive the dead is to reclaim your peace, to stop bleeding from a wound that will never be bandaged. And yet the act can feel unjust. If they never repented, why should you offer peace? If they never suffered, why should you let go? Does forgiveness without justice become a kind of betrayal? But what's the alternative? To carry rage forever? To let anger be your inheritance? Grief already weighs heavy. Does resentment have to join it? Forgiveness is not forgetting. It's not rewriting the story. It's naming the truth without letting it define your future. It's choosing not to be tethered to a ghost. It's a declaration that you are not only what they left behind, that you get to decide how much of their shadow lives in your light. And what about cultural forgiveness? Should societies forgive historical figures? Should we erase their statues, rename their streets, revise their legacies? Or should we let them stand, not as celebration but as warning? Can a culture forgive without erasing? Can we remember fully and still release? Or does remembering with clarity require us to carry both the brilliance and the damage? Maybe forgiveness isn't about the dead at all. Maybe it's about the living, about how we carry the past, about whether we pass it on with bitterness or with wisdom, about whether we choose to be haunted or to heal. So should the dead be forgiven? Maybe not for their sake, but for ours, because the dead cannot change, but we still can. How do you know it's real? You open your eyes. The light spills in. Shapes appear. Sound finds your ears. You feel the weight of your body, the air on your skin, the familiar hum of thought. It all feels real. But how do you know it is? Your senses tell you the world is there. But senses can be fooled. A shadow becomes a figure. A dream feels like a memory. Optical illusions bend straight lines. Pain lingers in a limb that no longer exists. The brain isn't a camera, it's a storyteller. It fills in gaps, guesses patterns, builds a world from fragments. So if the storyteller lies, what becomes of the story? Philosophers have asked this question for centuries. Descartes famously doubted everything until only one truth remained. I think, therefore I am. But even thinking is not proof of the world, only of experience, of presence. The rest, the sky, the ground, the people you love could in theory be fiction, a simulation, a dream inside a dream. Even science can't give certainty. It measures, it predicts, but it begins with assumptions that our instruments work, that our observations are reliable. It gives us models, not absolute truth. And those models change. The earth was once flat, then fixed, then revolving. Reality, it seems, evolves as our questions grow deeper. And then there's the mind. People hallucinate. People believe things that aren't true and suffer as if they are. The brain can generate entire realities without external input. So how do you distinguish the waking world from a vivid internal one? Is it consistency? Is it consensus? If 5 people share the same illusion, does it become real? Or is reality simply what most agree to believe until something breaks that agreement? You might say, reality is what persists when you stop believing in it. But even that begs the question, persisting where? In whose perception? If all you know is filtered through your mind, can you ever step outside it to verify the truth? Or are you forever watching shadows on the wall, hoping the cave is real? Maybe reality isn't something you find. Maybe it's something you agree on. A shared illusion with enough coherence to call it truth. A dance of perception that allows you to live, relate, survive. A fabric woven from countless threads of guesswork and trust. But still, in the quiet moments, the question returns. How do you know it's real? Maybe you don't. Maybe you never did. And maybe the only thing more mysterious than not knowing is how certain we pretend to be. Can truth exist alone? A truth sits, untouched. No one sees it. No one speaks it. No one knows it's there. It simply is. But is that really truth? Or just potential? Can truth exist without a witness? We often imagine truth as objective, unchanging, a kind of cosmic constant. 2 + 2 = 4. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius under standard pressure. These feel solid, independent of whether anyone believes them. But most truths aren't mathematical. Most are messy, fluid, tied to perception. She loved me. That was unfair. I am safe. These truths live in context. They breathe. And without someone to hold them, to name them, do they persist? A forest may be silent, but if no one hears the silence, is it still meaningful? If a betrayal happens and no one knows, is the wound still real? If an act of kindness is forgotten, does the goodness vanish, or does it remain folded into the structure of things? Can truth, like sound, require a receiver, or does it echo forever, even if no one is listening? Some truths wait to be discovered. Gravity existed before Newton, DNA before Watson and Crick. But were those truths active before recognition or dormant, like seeds in dry earth, waiting for water, for eyes, for language? Can a truth be complete if it never touches a mind? Or is it like a book unopened, real, yes, but still sleeping? Others argue that truth is a relationship, not a standalone fact, but a connection between idea and reality, between belief and what is. In that view, truth doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in dialogue, in the meeting between mind and world. Without that meeting, there's no truth, just possibility, just structure without form. But maybe there are truths so vast they don't need us, that existed long before thought and will exist long after. The expansion of the cosmos, the turning of time, the rise and fall of galaxies we'll never see. These truths may never be spoken, but they still unfold, unbothered by our absence. They are the universe's quiet machinery, functioning without witness, without need for validation. Still, on a human scale, truth feels fragile, easily hidden, warped, forgotten. And in that fragility, its power emerges, because once known, truth changes us. It stirs, it burns, it reshapes the space we move through. It binds us to something larger than opinion. It demands we take responsibility for what we now know and cannot unknow. So can truth exist alone? Maybe, but the question isn't just whether it exists, it's whether it matters before we know it. And whether, once we do, we're willing to carry it. Are some things unknowable? You seek answers. You ask questions. You gather data. You listen, read, measure, test. And still, some things remain just out of reach. Not because you haven't tried hard enough, not because the evidence is missing, but because the answer may not exist in a form you can grasp. Or worse, because the question itself defies any meaningful answer. So, are some things unknowable? From the dawn of thought, we've treated ignorance as a challenge, a temporary condition. If something is unknown, it's simply waiting to be discovered. Every generation peels back another layer of atoms, of minds, of stars. But at the edge of every discovery waits a deeper mystery. Like climbing a mountain only to find a taller one behind it. The closer we get, the more the edges blur. Physics runs into this wall often. What lies beyond the observable universe? What was before the Big Bang? What is dark matter made of? Our instruments can't reach there. Our equations fray. Our metaphors collapse. We know something's there, we just can't know what. Some scientists wonder if there are realms so disconnected from us that they might as well not exist. The unknowable, not as mystery, but as boundary. In math, Gödel's incompleteness theorems prove that within any consistent system, there are truths that can't be proven using the system's own rules. Logic itself contains mystery. Some truths exist, but we'll never be able to confirm them. Not because we're not clever enough, but because reality doesn't always allow its doors to be opened. Sometimes the key doesn't exist. And what about consciousness? We can describe its effects. We can map brain activity. But the inner experience, the taste of chocolate, the ache of longing, the color red, remains private. Philosophers call this the hard problem. It may be forever sealed behind the wall of subjectivity. Knowable only from within, and even within, language may fail. We can feel deeply and still never fully express it. Even in everyday life, the unknowable looms. What someone truly meant. What could have happened if you'd chosen differently? Whether you're living your best life or just the only one you'll get. These aren't just unanswered questions. They may be unanswerable, not because they lack meaning, but because they lack resolution. And yet, we try. We build stories, we simulate, we wonder, we write books, whisper prayers, ask impossible questions into the dark, because sometimes the pursuit matters more than the result. The act of asking gives shape to our existence. Maybe we're not built to know everything. Maybe we're built to reach, to stretch our minds into the unknown, not to conquer it, but to live beside it. So are some things unknowable? Yes, but maybe that's not a failure of knowledge. Maybe it's what makes knowledge precious. Not what we hold, but what we'll always hunger to touch. Does a pure fact exist? A fact is supposed to be solid, undeniable, a stone in the river of opinion. But when you reach for one, truly reach, how pure does it remain? We often treat facts as clean, self-evident truths. The sky is blue. Water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. There are 24 hours in a day, but peel back the layers and they begin to blur. The sky only appears blue under certain conditions. Water boils at that temperature only under specific pressure. Even time, broken into hours, is a human-made framework stretched over a spinning planet. So what is a pure fact? Untouched by bias, by interpretation, by context. Does such a thing exist? Science tries to get close. It isolates variables. It controls conditions. It repeats experiments. But even science begins with frameworks, assumptions, instruments, definitions. A measurement is only as reliable as the tool that took it. A conclusion is only as strong as the model it relies on. Facts emerge, yes, but through filters, and the filters are shaped by what we choose to measure, by what we think matters. Every discovery carries the fingerprints of the questions that led to it. And language complicates it further. No fact exists outside of words. And words carry histories, emotions, shadows. A fact spoken by one person may comfort, while from another it may wound. You failed the test. The baby didn't make it. She's gone. These may all be factual, but their impact depends on the listener, the moment, the story around them. The same sentence said twice can tell two different truths. Even numbers, our most objective tools, require context. 10 people died. Is that a tragedy? A miracle? A statistic? A pure fact doesn't tell you what to feel. It simply is. But humans aren't neutral receivers. We color every fact with emotion, memory, comparison. We give it meaning. We arrange facts into stories, and stories aren't neutral. They frame, they lead, they persuade. And then there's truth. Not every fact is meaningful, and not every truth is factual. I felt invisible. He never loved me. These may not be provable, but they carry a different kind of reality. A lived weight. So is a pure fact more real than a messy, emotional truth? Or is it just a simpler part of a much more tangled whole? Perhaps a pure fact does exist in the vacuum of abstraction, in a lab untouched by life. But the moment it enters the world, it meets minds, emotions, cultures, it becomes something else. Not less true, but less alone. And perhaps more alive for having been seen. So does a pure fact exist? Maybe, but maybe facts don't live in purity. Maybe they live in relationship. And maybe the only facts that matter are the ones that meet us where we actually are. Is illusion the same as real? A magician waves his hand. A rabbit appears. You know it's a trick, but your eyes believe. For a moment, wonder triumphs over logic. But outside the theater, the illusions are harder to spot. You scroll through carefully curated lives online. You wake from dreams that felt like memories. You hear words that sound like truth, but mean something else. And you live in a body that filters every single experience before you're even aware of it. So what if everything you know has passed through a hall of mirrors before it reached you? If perception shapes reality, can illusion ever be fully separated from what's real? The brain is not a passive recorder, it's a prediction machine. It doesn't just process what it sees, it guesses, fills gaps, invents coherence. Your visual field is full of blind spots, yet you see a complete world. You hear a sentence missing words, but understand the meaning. You feel sensations in limbs that no longer exist, illusions, not as errors, but as features, necessary simplifications to help you navigate a noisy, chaotic world. So if something feels real, functions like reality, and elicits a real emotional response, is it real enough? Virtual reality makes this question even sharper. A headset, a few sensors, and suddenly you feel awe standing on a cliff's edge. You feel fear, even though you know there's no danger. The sweat on your palm says it's real. So does the memory you form afterward. Does the fact that the world was constructed make it less real or just differently real? Philosophers have asked versions of this question for centuries, from Plato's allegory of the cave to Descartes' evil demon to modern simulation theory. The idea remains, what if everything you experience is constructed? But if you've always lived in the illusion, and if the illusion never breaks, how would you ever know? And more importantly, would it matter? Some illusions are deliberate, crafted by others, advertising, propaganda, ideology. They shape what you desire, what you fear, what you believe. But others arise from within, misunderstandings, traumas, hopes, a memory that feels clearer than the moment it came from. A future you imagine so vividly that it drives your choices today, and still you act. You love, you choose, you feel pain and joy and longing. Even inside illusion, those things remain real. So maybe illusion isn't the opposite of reality. Maybe it's just one of its layers. So is illusion the same as real? Not always. But sometimes it's real enough to move you. And maybe, in the end, that's the only measure that matters. Can truth be incomprehensible? Truth is supposed to bring clarity. We imagine it as a final answer, a light in the dark, something that makes sense of the chaos. But what if some truths don't clarify? What if they confuse, destabilize, overwhelm, or even defy comprehension altogether? Can truth be so vast, so alien, so ungraspable that even when it's right in front of us, we fail to understand it? In science, there are already signs. Quantum mechanics describes particles that exist in multiple states at once, until observed. That's not just confusing, it's counterintuitive. It contradicts everything experience teaches us, and yet it predicts reality with eerie precision. The math works. The results are reliable, but the truth of it, the deep why, slips through the fingers of understanding. In cosmology, theories of multiverses or extra dimensions offer elegant explanations for the universe's structure, but they require abandoning the intuition shaped by life in 3 dimensions. We can't imagine 10-dimensional space. We can only gesture at it, model it. If such things are real, they may be true in a way we can never feel to be true. They live beyond analogy. In theology and mysticism, some traditions suggest that the ultimate truth, God, the divine, the absolute, is not just unknown, but unknowable. Not because we haven't tried hard enough, but because our minds are simply not built to grasp infinite complexity. As a shadow cannot comprehend the object that casts it, so too might we be unequipped to fully grasp the shape of ultimate truth. The divine may be not a puzzle to solve, but a force too vast to ever reduce to language. And then there's the inner world. Human experience is full of half-understood truths. Emotions you can't explain, desires you can't trace, traumas that shape behavior long after the memory fades. The truth of who you are may not fit into language. It may be too fluid, too layered. Even your own story might contain truths that resist your own comprehension. Self-knowledge is not a destination but a moving target, one that shifts each time you draw near. So what do we do with a truth we can't understand? Do we reject it? Rewrite it? Worship it? Fear it? Or do we learn to live beside it, accepting its presence, even as its shape remains unclear? Maybe not all truths are meant to be tools. Maybe some are just meant to humble us. Maybe wisdom begins not in clarity, but in reverence. And maybe the highest form of understanding is knowing that we can't. Does the forgotten exist? A name slips your mind, a face blurs, a moment once vivid softens into fog, and eventually it disappears. So does it still exist? We think of forgetting as erasure, a deletion, a thing no longer real, but forgetting doesn't always mean the thing is gone. It just means it no longer lives in you. The tree still falls in the forest. The child still cried in the night. The hand was held. The word was spoken. But if no one remembers it, if no mind contains it, does it still matter? Does it still exist? Biologically, forgetting is essential. The brain is not a vault. It's a filter. We forget to survive, to prioritize, to make space. Some memories fade naturally. Others are buried, deliberately or unconsciously, because they hurt too much. But forgotten doesn't always mean gone. Memories leave imprints. They change behaviors, shape reactions, live on in gestures we can't explain. Even when the story vanishes, its effects remain. The laughter may be forgotten, but the tendency to smile without reason stays. The pain may fade, but the hesitation in your voice reveals it once was there. History is full of forgotten people, forgotten battles, forgotten loves, billions of lives, lived fully, deeply, and now dissolved. But do they not exist simply because no one remembers? Or do they exist in the structures they left behind? In the bloodlines, the cities, the books, the language. Perhaps the forgotten live in the fabric of the present. Even if their names have faded, their fingerprints linger in architecture, in rituals, in the shape of a melody passed down without a known composer. And on a more intimate level, we forget parts of ourselves. Childhood selves. Old dreams. Old selves. The way we used to laugh. The person we were with, someone long gone. Are those selves extinct or just sleeping? Do they leave behind echoes in our habits, in the pauses before we speak, in the way we hold sorrow or joy? Maybe forgetting is less about disappearance and more about transmutation. The memory becomes feeling. The feeling becomes instinct. The instinct becomes you. There's something haunting in the idea that what is forgotten might still be real. That reality doesn't require attention to persist, that what we forget may continue without us, that the forgotten are not lost, but simply silent. So does the forgotten exist? Maybe not in memory, but maybe in influence, in residue, in the invisible scaffolding of who we are. And maybe forgetting isn't an ending. Maybe it's just a shifting of the weight from what we carry in mind to what we carry in being. Is meaning real or imagined? You stare at the stars. You hold a newborn child. You lose someone you love. And in these moments, something stirs, something wordless, something that feels more than factual. We call it meaning. But what is it? Is meaning a real property of the universe? Or is it something we project onto it? Do events contain meaning, or do we inject it into them like dye into water? When we say something matters, are we discovering the truth or inventing it? Science can describe cause and effect, but it doesn't tell us what things mean. A star explodes. A species goes extinct. A child is born. These are facts, but meaning asks what they signify, why they move us, whether they matter in the story of everything, and that word, story, might be the key. Human beings are story-making creatures. We connect dots. We weave patterns. We turn chaos into coherence, randomness into rhythm. But in doing so, do we find meaning or create it? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Existentialists like Sartre said meaning isn't something you're given, it's something you forge. Life begins neutral, even absurd, and it's up to you to carve significance into it. Others, like Plato or theists across traditions, claim that meaning is embedded in the fabric of existence. It's not made, it's discovered, a purpose that exists whether you see it or not. But perhaps there's a third option. Maybe meaning is neither fully invented nor fully found. Maybe it's co-created, something that emerges from the relationship between mind and world. Like color, which requires both light and an eye to see it, meaning may arise only where experience meets consciousness. Consider grief. It feels heavy with meaning. But does that meaning exist in the event, the death itself, or in the way you loved? When you write poetry, or raise a child, or forgive someone who hurt you, where is the meaning? In the act, in the memory, in the feeling it stirs. And if meaning is imagined, if it's a lens and not a law, does that make it less real or more powerful? A rock exists, whether you believe in it or not, but meaning can reshape the direction of your life. It can give you the strength to survive. It can collapse you in awe. It can start revolutions, heal trauma, keep someone alive through a single sentence. So is meaning real or imagined? Maybe the question is wrong. Maybe the real mystery is how something imagined can become the most real thing we know. Can logic validate itself? Logic is the backbone of reason. It tells us how to argue, how to prove, how to think clearly. It's the thread that weaves mathematics, philosophy, and science into coherence. But there's a question that rattles the floorboards beneath even the strongest logical system. Can logic prove its own validity? At first, it seems like it should. Logic is designed to be rigorous, to test claims, to detect contradictions. But the moment it turns inward, when logic tries to validate itself using its own tools, things start to shake. This is more than a theoretical riddle. In the early 20th century, mathematicians hoped to build a complete, airtight system in which all mathematical truths could be proven using pure logic. But then Kurt Gödel changed everything. His incompleteness theorem showed that any sufficiently powerful logical system cannot prove all the truths within it, and worse, it cannot prove its own consistency. If it's not contradictory, it cannot show that using only its own rules. In other words, logic can build castles, but it can't certify its own foundation from inside. You always need to step outside to verify. But what lies outside logic? Intuition. Faith? Another logic. And if we appeal to a second system, don't we just push the problem back a step? Like mirrors facing each other, the validation escapes us into infinite regress. So how do we trust logic if it can't prove itself? Is it faith disguised as certainty? A habit of mind we never question? Or is it like a ladder we climb, not because we can prove it's unbreakable, but because so far it holds? We trust logic because it works, because it predicts eclipses and powers computers and holds courtrooms together. But practical success doesn't prove truth. It only suggests reliability. If a machine keeps running, we trust its design, but that doesn't mean we understand the laws behind its engine. Some argue that logic is not absolute, but evolved, that our brains developed rules of inference because they helped us survive. If that's true, then logic is not a divine language, but a biological strategy, a useful fiction, a mirror, not a window. And yet, logic feels inevitable. It's hard to imagine a world where if A equals B and B equals C, then A does not equal C. Even when we doubt it, we do so through it, like trying to leap out of your own shadow. So can logic validate itself? No, not completely. And maybe that's not a flaw. Maybe it's a reminder that even the most precise instruments we use to understand the world are still shaped by the mystery of being inside it. Can silence hold a truth? A room full of people goes quiet. A friend stares out the window instead of answering. You ask a question and the reply is a pause. And somehow we often think of truth as something spoken, a fact, an argument, a confession, something said aloud, written down, proven. But there are truths that live in silence, unspoken, unwritten, and yet unmistakable. So can silence hold a truth, not just hide it, but contain it? In conversation, silence can speak louder than words. A pause can reveal hesitation, fear, grief, even love. A long silence after "I love you" can be as loud as a scream. The lack of denial can sound like an admission. The absence of comfort can wound like a blow. In these moments, silence doesn't merely accompany truth, it becomes it. It forms a space where honesty blooms, not because of what's added, but because of what's withheld. In art and music, silence is a tool. The space between notes shapes melody. The empty canvas amplifies the brushstroke. In literature, the unsaid is often the most powerful. What the character refuses to speak tells us more than a monologue. What's left out pulls us in. The white space becomes a mirror, asking us to supply meaning from within. Even nature speaks in silence. The hush before a storm, the stillness of snowfall, the quiet of mourning animals or alert prey. These silences are not empty. They're charged with tension, with meaning, with presence. They remind us that sound is not the only carrier of truth. A landscape at rest can scream of beauty or loss, depending on who's looking. In spiritual traditions, silence is often sacred. Monks take vows of silence, not to withhold, but to listen more deeply. Mystics retreat into silence to meet something beyond language. Sometimes, truth isn't distorted by words, it's revealed by their absence. When language falls short, silence remains. And in that space, something honest might emerge. Something not shaped by grammar or argument, but by presence, by stillness, by being. But silence can also be evasive. It can hide truth. It can protect, deflect, or deny. The silent witness, the unspoken past, the closed mouth in the courtroom, all can obscure reality. Not every silence is meaningful. Some are cages, some are shields, some are empty by design. Silence, like speech, is a tool, and like any tool, it depends on the hand that uses it. Still, we sense the difference. There is a silence that feels hollow, and a silence that hums with truth. There is the silence of indifference, and the silence of knowing too much. So can silence hold a truth? Yes, and sometimes only silence can. Because there are truths too deep for words, too raw, too sacred, too vast. And silence is the only shape they'll fit into. Is death the end or doorway? You feel the final breath leave the body. The warmth fades. The silence deepens. The world continues, but something unmistakable has shifted. Something has ended. Or has it? For centuries, we've asked, is death a conclusion or a crossing? Is it the final punctuation of a story or the beginning of another sentence we cannot yet read? Biologically, death is clear. The heart stops. The cells shut down. Consciousness flickers out. The systems that sustained life unravel. And from that standpoint, death is an ending, an irreversible collapse of function. But biology is not the only lens. Culturally, spiritually, philosophically, death is often seen not as a wall, but as a veil. In ancient Egypt, death led to the judgment of the soul. In Hinduism and Buddhism, it is transition, rebirth, karma, continuation. Christianity sees death as a passage to eternal life. Even in secular thought, people speak of legacies, of energy returning to the universe, of being remembered. Death becomes not an endpoint, but a handoff, a passing of the torch to time, to memory, to meaning. Why do we resist the idea of death as final? Is it fear, hope, or is it a deeper sense that something within us, consciousness, awareness, essence, might not be bound by breath and bone? We build rituals, monuments, prayers. We write eulogies, plant trees, whisper to the air. We act as if someone is listening, as if someone lingers, and maybe they do, if not as spirits, then as something more subtle, a warmth, a rhythm, a change in how we live. Neuroscience struggles with this. The mind arises from the brain, but no one can point to the exact moment consciousness appears or disappears. Some near-death experiences defy easy explanation. People report visions, a sense of detachment, overwhelming peace. Are these the last sparks of a dying brain, or glimpses of something beyond? We don't know, but the stories persist, and stories too are a kind of life. And what about the dead who live on in us? The laugh you inherited from your father, the phrases your grandmother used, the shape of someone's love that still softens your anger. Are they truly gone or merely changed? If they continue to shape the living, is death ever complete? And if memory is a form of presence, then perhaps forgetting is the only true death. Maybe death is not one moment, but many, the death of the body, the death of memory, the death of influence. Each unfolds at a different pace, and maybe something continues quietly, invisibly, not in a heaven or reincarnation, but in presence, in mystery, in the silence they leave behind. So is death the end or doorway? Maybe it depends on how you define end. Maybe death closes the chapter called you, but the story, in some way, still turns its pages. Or maybe death is neither end nor doorway. Maybe it's the moment the story stops needing words and starts speaking in the language of echoes. Where do we go and sleep? Your eyes close. The room fades. Time begins to blur. The world slips away, and something else begins. But where do you go? For a third of your life, you vanish, not just into rest, but into an altered state of being. You surrender your awareness. You dissolve into dreams. You wake hours later, uncertain of where you've been or what part of you remained. So where do we go in sleep? Biologically, sleep is restoration. The body repairs. The brain processes memories, regulates hormones, clears toxins. It's a rhythm as old as life itself, shared by nearly every creature on Earth. And yet, its subjective experience, the way it feels to disappear from waking life, remains mysterious. When you dream, you're somewhere. You're someone. You move through imagined landscapes, feel real emotions, make choices. In those moments, the dream is your world. Sometimes you forget your waking life entirely. Other times you become lucid, half aware, half asleep, walking the line between realms. Are these worlds fabricated illusions, or are they windows into another layer of consciousness? Some ancient traditions viewed dreams as journeys. The Egyptians believed dreams were visits to the realm of the gods. Indigenous cultures often treat dreams as visions, messages, glimpses beyond the veil. Even Freud and Jung saw dreams as doorways to the unconscious, to archetypes, to the hidden self. So what if sleep is not a retreat, but a departure? What if it's not just the absence of wakefulness, but the presence of another kind of presence? A place where the self reshapes itself nightly, freed from the rules of physics and memory. You go somewhere. Maybe not in space, but in mind, in self, in meaning. And what about the moments of no dreaming? The blank stretches, the times you vanish completely, only to reappear later with no trace of where you were. Is that still you? Did the you go dark, or did it go somewhere language can't follow? Some neuroscientists suggest that consciousness flickers off entirely, that there is no one home. But how can a sense of self return so seamlessly if it was ever truly gone? What does it mean to not exist for several hours and then resume as if continuity never broke? Where do we go and sleep? Maybe we go inward, beyond thought, beyond story, into the raw machinery of being. Maybe we dissolve into the collective stream of everything dreaming, or maybe we go nowhere at all. But if sleep is a kind of disappearance, then waking up is a kind of rebirth. And perhaps that's why the morning light sometimes feels sacred, because it brings us back from a place we cannot name. Could rebirth go unnoticed? You open your eyes. A new day begins. But what if it isn't just a new day? What if it's a new life? Rebirth is an ancient idea rooted in Hinduism, Buddhism, and countless spiritual traditions, a cycle of dying and returning. Not just metaphorically, but literally, the soul leaves one body and enters another. But if that's true, why don't we remember? Why does each life feel like the first and only one? Could rebirth be happening all the time, and we simply fail to notice? Memory is not as reliable as we like to think. Childhood fades. Dreams vanish. Even moments from yesterday blur. We build our identity from fragments and assume that continuity equals self. But if you woke up tomorrow with no memory of today, would you still be you? And if not, then what are we losing every night? Every moment that passes without being held. There are children who report memories of lives they never lived. Details that match historical records. Faces they've never seen that feel familiar. Are these coincidences, fantasies, or echoes of something real? Some scientists study these claims seriously, while others dismiss them. But the question lingers, what if forgetting is part of the design? Imagine a cycle of rebirth where memory is wiped clean, not as punishment but as necessity. If you remembered every past hurt, every death, every failure, you might never move. You'd carry the weight of centuries. Maybe forgetting is what allows beginning, what makes life livable, what lets love feel new each time. Maybe forgetting is not loss at all, but grace in disguise. The freedom to live without baggage you were never meant to carry forever. And what if rebirth isn't between lives, but within one? People change. Radically. After trauma, after awakening, after grief. The person you were 10 years ago might be a stranger to the one you are now. Did something end? Did something begin? Could rebirth be psychological, not spiritual? A breaking and remaking of self, unnoticed but no less real. A version of you dies in the aftermath of heartbreak. Another is born in the quiet joy of healing. We cross thresholds, often without even noticing. We stepped over a line. Perhaps rebirth is less like a thunderclap and more like the slow turn of a wheel. Quiet, constant. You are born again each time you forgive, each time you learn, each time you choose a new path, and you die a little. Each time you cling to what no longer serves. Rebirth might not come with a new name or body, but with a new way of seeing, of being. So could rebirth go unnoticed? Maybe it always does. Maybe the greatest transformations don't announce themselves. They arrive softly. And by the time you notice, you've already become someone new. Is immortality a prison? We dream of it. We chase it. We write myths and code and promises to defeat death. Immortality, the final triumph over time, to live forever. But would it be a gift or a cage? Imagine waking up every morning knowing there is no end, no final breath, no closing chapter. At first, it might feel exhilarating, limitless. You could learn every language, explore every land, watch empires rise and fall, see the stars bloom and die. You'd have time to do everything. And then, more time, and more. What happens when there are no deadlines? When every goal becomes a checkpoint, not a destination? When the urgency that gives life meaning dissolves into endless repetition, without the pressure of death, would choice still matter? Or would you drift, unmoored, through centuries without consequence? Philosophers have warned of this. Bernard Williams argued that immortality would lead to unbearable boredom, that desire itself depends on finality. When you can always try again, nothing feels urgent, nothing feels real. Even love, which draws much of its beauty from fragility, might fade when the people you love are also endless, or when they aren't and you must watch them die. And if you outlive everyone, every generation, every friend, every culture, the world would change until you no longer recognize it. until you no longer recognize yourself? Would you adapt forever, or become a ghost, walking through time with no tether, no home? Immortality might not mean freedom. It might mean captivity. Not in a cell, but in a loop of your own thoughts, your own patterns, your own reflection. And after 1,000 years, even a palace becomes a prison if you cannot leave. Even joy can sour with endless repetition. Even beauty can become dull when it's seen 1,000,000 times without contrast, without loss. The fear isn't just that you'll run out of new things, but that you won't. That novelty itself becomes hollow. That every sunrise loses its color. That meaning erodes when there's no end to give it weight. Would music still move you? Would art still stir your soul? Or would all experience become noise, background static in a life that cannot end? And yet part of us still longs for it. We seek it through medicine, technology, memory, not because we want to live forever, but because we want more. More time with those we love. More time to become who we were meant to be. Immortality seduces not with infinity, but with the illusion of enough. It promises that one more year, one more moment, will finally make us whole. So is immortality a prison? Maybe not always, but perhaps it becomes one the moment we forget how to let go. Because freedom isn't just the ability to live without end. It's the ability to end without fear. And maybe the most precious thing about life is that it doesn't last forever. Can you ever truly end? Your body stops. Your breath fades. Your name is spoken less. One day, for the last time, and eventually, no one living remembers you. But is that the end? We think of endings as absolute. Lights out. Curtain closed. The final page. But in reality, few things end all at once. Most endings are gradual, layered, and uncertain. A river doesn't end, it merges. A star doesn't disappear, it collapses, transforms. A melody fades, but its final note lingers in memory. So what about you? When you die, your body returns to the earth. Molecules scatter. Atoms join new patterns. The carbon in your breath becomes leaves. The calcium in your bones feeds soil. In that sense, you never truly end. You redistribute, you reshape, you echo in the very structure of life. You don't vanish, you reassemble. But what about yourself? Your thoughts, your memories, your I? If the body is gone, is that self gone too? Is consciousness simply an event in the brain, flickering briefly like lightning in a summer sky? Or is it something deeper, something that doesn't end when the neurons go dark? Can something so rich, so layered, truly cease to be without a trace? Some traditions say the soul continues, that death is not an end, but a doorway. Others believe in collective memory, that as long as someone remembers you, you still exist in some way. But even memory fades. So is forgetting the final death? Is silence the ultimate erasure? Or is there a kind of truth that survives without being known, like an old light still traveling from a long-dead star? Maybe endings are more like transitions. You end as one thing, begin as another. Just as caterpillars do not survive into butterflyhood, yet something continues, something carries over. Not the form, but the essence. And maybe the same is true of people. The way you shaped others, the way you changed someone's course, the way you made someone feel less alone, those don't end when you do. They ripple outward, subtle, invisible, persistent. And even if no one remembers, your existence still altered the timeline. You left ripples in places you never saw. You caused smiles you never knew. You helped build a world others now stand in. Can something that left a mark ever fully vanish? Is the effect not enough to say the cause still lives, somewhere, somehow, in its wake? So can you ever truly end? Maybe not. Maybe ending is just another story we tell to make sense of a change too vast to grasp. Maybe what we call the end is simply the moment you stop being you in one form and begin becoming everything else. Maybe to end is to dissolve, not disappear. To blend into something greater. To become what you once touched, what you once loved, what you once changed. Are you still you over time? You look at a photo from 10 years ago. The hair is different. The smile is different. The thoughts you had then seem foreign. The choices, the beliefs, the way you saw the world, almost unrecognizable. So, are you still the same person? We speak of ourselves as continuous beings. I did this. I remember that. But which I are we talking about? The child? The teenager? The person you were before heartbreak or after loss? If everything about you has changed, your body, your mind, your preferences, what remains? Philosophers call this the problem of personal identity. The ship of Theseus. If you replace every plank of a ship one by one, is it still the same ship? And if your cells regenerate, your memories shift, your personality evolves, what anchors the self across time? Some say it's memory, that as long as you remember being you, you are you. But memory is fragile. We misremember, we forget. We rewrite the past to suit the present. Others point to the body, but bodies change too. Cells die, faces age. Injuries rewrite our sense of movement, even our sense of self. Perhaps it's narrative, a story we tell ourselves about who we are. A story that threads together our past and present and projects itself into the future. But stories evolve. Chapters are edited, plot lines are dropped. So what happens when the story we tell ourselves no longer fits? What happens when the I we wake up with feels like a stranger to the one who made yesterday's choices? And yet, something does feel constant. A quiet presence, a thread running through every version of you. Not a thing you can point to, but something you sense, like a melody that changes key, but still feels like the same song. Maybe the self is less like an object and more like a pattern, fluid but familiar. A rhythm of thought, of habit, of desire that echoes even through transformation. Psychologists talk about the remembering self and the experiencing self. The part of you that lives in the moment and the part that tells the story afterward. They don't always agree. One suffers while the other reinterprets. One forgets while the other insists. But perhaps identity lies in their conversation, in the ongoing negotiation between who you were, who you think you were, and who you are becoming. Or maybe there's no fixed you at all. Maybe identity is a river, not a rock. Maybe we only appear solid when viewed quickly. Zoom in and we're always changing, always becoming. You aren't a single point, but a trajectory. Not a thing, but a becoming. So are you still you over time? Maybe not exactly. But maybe that's what makes being human so extraordinary. You are not who you were. And yet you carry the echo. You are not who you will be. And yet, you are the path they'll walk. You are every version of yourself, layered, evolving, contradictory, and still whole. Is identity just a story? You tell someone who you are. Your name, your job, where you're from, maybe a few memories that feel important. You string them together like beads on a thread, hoping the picture makes sense. This is me, you say. But is it? Or is it just a story? Stories give shape to chaos. They connect dots, define characters, explain change, and your identity, your sense of who you are, is built from the same material. You are a character in your own unfolding tale. You have a backstory, a conflict, a set of beliefs about what kind of person you are. You tell yourself that story over and over, polishing it like a stone, not because it's always true, but because it feels familiar. It gives you something to hold on to. But stories aren't facts. They're choices. We leave things out. We rewrite. We forget. We exaggerate. We simplify. And often we tell stories not to reveal the truth, but to survive it, to feel coherent, to make pain useful, to create meaning out of confusion. We tell stories to be heard, but also to hear ourselves. The story becomes a mirror, and we keep polishing it until it shows us something we can accept. Think about it. You change. Your beliefs evolve, your desires shift. What you thought was essential 5 years ago might now feel irrelevant. And yet, you still say this is who I am, as if identity is stable, singular, knowable. But maybe it isn't. Maybe identity isn't a thing at all. Maybe it's a performance, a habit, a story told so often it feels like truth. We act it out in gestures, in clothes, in tone of voice, until it becomes muscle memory. Psychology suggests we each have many selves, contextual selves. The person you are at work, the one you are with your parents, the version of you that emerges in solitude. None of them are false, but none tell the whole story. So which one is the real you? Or is the real you just the story that tries to hold them together? A patchwork narrative stitched together by memory and desire. And if that story breaks, if trauma, loss, or revelation shatters the narrative, what happens then? Do you stop being you? Or do you simply start telling a different story with a new beginning? Sometimes it's not a clean rewrite, it's a page torn out, a plot twist you never asked for, a narrator who changes mid-sentence. There's power in stories, but there's also danger. When the story becomes too rigid, it becomes a prison. I'm not good at love. I'm always the outsider. I'm broken. We repeat these lines until they echo louder than reality. But stories can be rewritten. And perhaps the deepest kind of growth is learning to become the narrator, not just the character. To step back, take the pen, and decide what comes next. So is identity just a story? Maybe. But stories shape worlds, and the story you tell about yourself might be the most important one you ever write. Can souls share oneself? A face in the mirror feels familiar, but the thoughts behind it aren't just yours. A word slips from your lips in a voice that feels borrowed. A dream unfolds, and you awaken with emotions you can't place. What if you aren't alone inside yourself? Across cultures and ages, people have imagined souls not as singular, but as composite. In ancient Egypt, the soul was made of many parts. In some tribal cosmologies, people carry not just their own spirit, but the spirits of ancestors. And in modern psychology, the self isn't a monolith, it's a system, multiple voices, competing desires, internal dialogues that never quite resolve. Sometimes the feeling is literal. People speak of possession, of channeled voices, of speaking wisdom they don't remember learning. In art and creativity, many describe being overtaken by something else, an idea, a presence, a force that flows through them, not from them. Is this metaphor? Is it mental state? Or is it a glimpse into something deeper, a collective soul, a shared thread of consciousness weaving through more than one life? Even science begins to blur these lines. Split brain studies show that the brain can house separate centers of awareness. Neurologically, it's possible for different parts of the same mind to operate independently, to make choices the other part doesn't know about. And if that can happen within one brain, what happens across many? We share language. We share culture. We absorb the gestures, the wounds, the fears of those around us, sometimes so deeply that we can no longer tell where they end and we begin. Is empathy just imagination? Or is it a subtle blending of spirit, a recognition not just of similarity, but of shared essence? In love, we often say, "We became one." In grief, we say, "A part of me is gone." In faith, we speak of unity, of merging with the divine, of being vessels for something larger than ourselves. These aren't just poetic turns. They reflect an ancient intuition that the self is porous, that souls can overlap, entangle, echo through each other. Perhaps what we call a self is just a boundary we draw, temporary, permeable, a shell that lets different souls meet in one place for a time, not erased, not possessed, but joined in conversation. in conflict, in coexistence. So can souls share one self? If you've ever been moved by a voice that wasn't yours, cried for a pain you didn't earn, or felt deeply changed by someone who now lives only in your bones, then maybe you already know the answer. Some truths don't need to be solved. They just need to be carried. Is memory needed to exist? You wake up one day with no name, no past, no story. You know how to speak, to move, to breathe, but not who you are. Do you still exist? Memory is the scaffolding of identity. It holds together the idea of a continuous self. You remember your childhood, your pain, your triumphs, your mistakes. This chain of moments tells you that you are real. But what if that chain breaks? Are you still you without the thread? We've seen this question unfold in real lives. In cases of amnesia, patients lose decades in an instant. They forget their families, their favorite foods, even their own reflections. And yet they go on living. They laugh, cry, wonder. They still feel. They still choose. If memory is gone but experience continues, what does that say about the soul beneath the story? Can presence exist independently of continuity? Some argue that memory is identity, that without it there is no self, only reaction, that what makes you you is the narrative continuity, the knowledge of who you've been. But others see memory as a tool, not a foundation. Important, yes, but not definitive. After all, you forget most of your life. The vast majority of your days vanish. Do the forgotten hours stop existing, or do they continue, quietly shaping you from behind the curtain? And then there's trauma. Some memories wound so deeply they're buried. Some return in fragments. Others never surface again. Do people who repress pain lose part of their existence? Or do they adapt, becoming new versions of themselves in the absence of what they once carried? Is forgetting a flaw or a form of evolution, an unconscious choice to rewrite the self for survival? Memory can be rewritten. Studies show how easily false memories form, how photographs, suggestions, even dreams can reshape what we believe we lived. People swear by recollections that never happened. Others forget events that defined their lives. So if memory is this fluid, this fragile, can we really call it the cornerstone of being? Or is it more like paint on the surface of a structure, important but not structural? Maybe existence isn't about what you remember, but what you embody. The way you love, the way you move through space, the quiet decisions you make without knowing why. These too are forms of memory, not of facts, but of patterns, of energy, of presence. Even without narrative, you act, you feel, you are. You leave a mark not because of what you recall, but because of how you exist in the moment. So is memory needed to exist? Only if you believe the self is a story. But if the self is a presence, something lived, not told, then perhaps memory is just the echo, not the source. And when the echo fades, what remains may not be emptiness, but stillness. A kind of truth that doesn't need remembering to be real. Is there no final answer? We reach and wonder and reach again. From the first breath to the last thought, our lives are shaped by questions. Who am I? Why does anything exist? What should I do with my time? Behind every pursuit, science, faith, art, love, there's a question driving us forward. A quiet longing that threads through everything we build. But what if there is no final answer? What if truth isn't a destination, but a horizon that retreats as you move toward it? What if the closer you get, the more the shape changes until you realize you were never chasing a thing, but a process? Throughout history, we've sought ultimate truths. Philosophers built systems, prophets heard voices, scientists formulated laws. Each generation reached a little farther. Some believed in a single answer: God, logic, unity, love. Others believed in a grand equation that could explain everything. But time and again the answers raised more questions, And those questions, in turn, became new starting points. The atom was final. Then it wasn't. The earth was the center. Then it wasn't. Time was absolute. Then it bent. Even death, once seen as the end, is now studied as a mystery that may open rather than close. Even our most confident frameworks tremble under scrutiny. Language fails. Reason loops. Models break. And yet we keep asking, not because we're foolish, but because we're human. Because asking gives shape to the space around us. It gives meaning to movement, even if the destination never arrives. The journey matters, not for where it leads, but for what it reveals as we walk it. And maybe we've misunderstood the point. Maybe the universe isn't a riddle to be solved, but a presence to be witnessed. Maybe the question is the answer. Not in a clever twist, but in a quiet truth. That our hunger to know is itself a kind of knowing. That the search doesn't fail because it doesn't end. It succeeds because it begins again. Because the act of seeking draws us into awareness, and awareness draws us into awe. Children ask why. Not to corner truth, but to touch it. Lovers ask, "Do you love me?" Not to confirm, but to feel. We ask not to close the loop, but to keep it open. To let wonder breathe. To let the unknown stay just close enough to guide us, but far enough to remain sacred. So is there no final answer? Not the kind that ends the conversation. But perhaps there is one that deepens it. The act of asking. The courage to not know. The silence after the question, where something deeper waits. Something not to solve, but to sit with. Thank you for spending this time with us, wandering through the questions that have no end. If these thoughts lingered with you, if they stirred something silent, or left you wondering just a little longer, that's exactly the point. There may be no final answers, but there is still the journey. And if this journey moved you, stay with us. Subscribe for more quiet explorations of what it means to think, to feel, to be. And if you'd like to share your reflections, your own unanswerable questions, leave a comment below. We read them. We feel them. We're walking this path too. Until next time, thank you for listening, and thank you for wondering.